Welcome to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, also known as
Snake Bros. And step right up, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast. That's right, step right up, see the freak show, see the snakes, the long snakes. This is a show where we attempt to explain everything in the universe using only waves and pyramids and snakes. Now get out of here, kid, you're bothering me. So our accuracy level has gone down because the show observer is not with us right now.
Yeah.
So we are going to be back to getting almost everything wrong. Not all of it, just almost everything. Instead of we're getting most things wrong, but not everything before. So
The show observer is in a wreck on the highway.
that's right. Currently in a smashed car. Or near one. Yeah. So he actually recently became an EMT, so he's, following his duty right now, I think. Oh, he says he's back in transit. I just got this message from him. He's back in transit, so. Okay. And he's on his way here, so hopefully he will show up at some point later on in the show and talk to us about Zoroastrians, which he'll explain what that is.
His only assignment
That's right.
in a year.
That's right. Go learn about the first monotheism. And they're probably the ones that built all the...
Don't tell him.
Oh, okay.
You gotta leave that to Brett.
All right. I don't know if he's going to talk about that, but yeah. He probably will.
So we've had no internet for all week.
That's right.
And since Friday last week.
Massive storm rolled in and destroyed our internet.
So I don't have a whole lot in my news stuff, but I think I have something. Let me
Yeah, I was
check
looking
it
through
out
mine.
here.
It just came back today, so we're having to...
We're running behind here. But I've been listening to the Book of Enoch
Yes.
recently, multiple times. And when I say listening to it, I'm listening to my phone say it. So that there's not an audiobook that I know of.
Yeah. And it's reading... And you got a special version, right? Like one that was sort of...
Yeah, I need to pull it up. But once again, I was trying to talk about this to prevent silence while we're just doing stuff on our phones. I don't know who the author is because I wasn't expecting to be talking about an author, but I actually want to talk about the author of this book because it's not Enoch. Enoch is the author of the Book of Enoch, probably.
Yeah.
But this guy sort of made a quote-unquote translation. It's not really... There was already an English translation. He just made it more modern.
Right. It's unlike a religious text, which has all these annotations and all these citations and everything like that, so that half the page is unrelated or peripherally related or things about translation. This guy kind of made a version where if you're having your phone read it to you, it makes sense because your phone will just randomly start reading citations and stuff like that.
Yeah, dude, that was freaking me out. I just originally downloaded the PDF of the Ethiopian version or Ethiopic or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
And it just was insane because there actually was a guy who translated that one too, and he had his notes in there.
Yeah.
And some thoughts that he would
they're always
tell
annotated.
tell you about what a problem with this one word that he just said was, or this part of the word was gone, so he kind of fills in the rest of the sentence a little bit.
Yeah.
Based on context and all of that. So this dude did a modern English translation. It's by Andy McCracken.
Cool. The Kraken.
With introduction and notes by Andy McCracken. So, I want to talk to this guy, Andy McCracken.
Yeah,
this is really good. But I disagree with him on a couple of things,
Which is fine. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
We have this thing where we can disagree with people and still get along with them.
No,
it's pretty cool.
We can't, Russ.
Oh, shit.
Shut up.
Do I have to leave now? I can't even hang out with you anymore.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know the story, the basic gist is Enoch is he's Noah's grandfather, right?
Yeah.
Grandfather, and he is just minding his own business, bothering no one.
Wait, is he his grandfather or great grandfather? Because
think
you have
he's his-
Lamech was Noah's father, and then
He's
Methuselah-
Noah's great grandfather.
Right,
yeah.
Methuselah is his grandfather.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Methuselah is Noah's grandfather. Then Lamech is Noah's father.
Yeah, and they lived for hundreds and hundreds of years, so you would have your great grandfather still be alive. Like that must be really confusing. Well, great grandfather told me to do it, and then great grandfather said I shouldn't do that, but great grandfather said I should do it. You're like, fuck, this is getting confusing. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, okay. One of that brings up an interesting point that Andy McCracken made, which was that Enoch's age is 365,
Yeah, very strange.
which he thinks is actually like esoteric information about the solar year.
Yeah,
It's not really his age.
it's esoteric. Okay, I've been reading Velikovsky Heresies by Laird Scranton, and he was talking about this very problem because Velikovsky goes through the whole deal, right?
Yeah.
And the issue with like, why do all these ancient cultures have 360-day years? Mm-hmm. You know, which is considered now to be a ritual calendar because it's not accurate, right? They all have, but then at the very same time, all over the world, they all changed suddenly to a 365-day year calendar in which the months were fluid. In other words, the months were being announced. This is where we get the word calendar from. I can't remember what the original word was, but the word calendar stems from a word that the Romans used that basically meant to announce the month, right?
Yeah.
Because these guys are watching, and then they would announce like, okay, the next month has just begun, because they didn't know, because it was like they all apparently used to be the same number of days,
Yeah.
but then something happened, and then they became fluid. So now we have anywhere from 28 to 31 days.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, apparently in the Book of Enoch, they have different numbers of days, because he goes through one of the parts of the book that I really want to talk about is when he's describing basically the day-night cycle all throughout the year, like the different ratio of day to night.
Oh yeah.
And so he goes, then you wait for 30 days, right? And
Yeah.
then it's like this, and then you wait for 30 days, and then it's like this, and then you wait for 31 days, and then it's
Yeah.
like this. So they change.
Yeah.
I didn't hear a 28 in there, but
February. Dumb.
it doesn't have to have a 28.
Right. Yeah. I remember you talking about that. Yeah, I do want to hear you talk about that again, because that was a really badass part.
But yeah, basically the you know, Ty's calling
again. Yeah.
He
Always.
knows.
He knows.
Tuesday night, Snake Bros. Like, what is the deal? It's Snake Bros time. Fuck off. Okay. That ought to teach him.
Yeah. Take that, Ty. Whenever you hear this, take it again.
Take it twice.
That's right. You're gonna hear it just now, and then when you listen to this, you're gonna hear it again. Take it twice. Stop calling us again.
On Tuesdays at night.
Yeah. Now he's gonna send me a text. Watch. Hey, what's going on?
So, okay. So anyway, you might be right. I don't. That's the opinion of Andy McCracken, that the
Yeah.
360 or 365, whatever it was the solar year, which is a good. I can't remember which one.
Isn't Enoch one of the ones that never died? He didn't die. He was whisked away by God, like Noah. So like he doesn't really have a. So his age can be esoteric because there's no known. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So they could say, yeah, 365 years because he's like he's also.
Yeah, I thought that. I remember hearing from either it was in Graham Hancock or somebody's one of
Yeah.
these other books where Enoch just like gets taken up into
and he was
the heavens and then
right.
whatever.
And that was a gift or whatever. It was called a gift, like with Noah. You know, Noah and his wife and the steersman leave the ark to go onto the land or whatever, and then like they just don't ever come back inside. And people are like inside, they're like, where did he go? And then they open the door, and God's out there. And he's like, sorry, I took him away. He's gone.
But as far as I know, and I could be wrong because I'm listening to this while I'm at work.
Yeah.
But that's not in here. That's not in this book. That he doesn't die and just goes up into heaven and vanishes or whatever. The end of the book, I think, is mostly like his he does these like parables
Yeah.
and prophecies and shit.
But the Book of Enoch was supposedly written by Enoch, so it shouldn't have anything about him disappearing forever. in it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna go away forever.
That's right. I've disappeared.
Well, I'm saying that I can't remember this for sure. I don't remember hearing anything about like, okay, and now I'm going with the gods. And
Right.
Never to
yeah.
return.
Probably he didn't know that at the time. I don't know. Isn't he also probably Tohti, like Hermes Trismegistus, like
I have no idea.
the god of knowledge, right? Because he was taken up and told to write all this shit down to give it to the humans, right?
Right. Well, okay, that's the weird thing is that I've heard people say that too, like the Pillars of Enoch, that type of shit.
Yeah.
But I think that's like what he was in this book. Basically, he is told to be a scribe.
Yeah.
They make him their scribe. Okay,
Right.
so basically,
Just take dictation.
Enoch is Noah's great grandfather, and he's just minding his own business, bothering no one. And some like quote unquote angels approach him or whatever, the Watchers,
Yeah.
and
We've been watching you.
they're like, come with us, and they basically take him into some crazy shit that he describes as like a room made of crystal.
Yeah.
And there's like tongues of fire like coming out of the walls and out of the ceiling and stuff, and then they take him into a room where he sees like the basically God's in there or whatever. But first he passes like all this crazy shit, and there's one that's like a prison, and he's like, it's so terrible. And the prison is for the angels that do bad things,
Yeah.
like, you know, the fallen angels or whatever.
And all the horrible things that they're doing to them or whatever.
Yeah, and Enoch's like, oh my god, like, you know, he's feeling sorry for him, and the other guys are like, dude, don't feel sorry for those guys.
Yeah.
They're bad.
They're bad.
But anyway,
that chain that's eating his guts forever, it's a good thing.
yeah, so they tell him, they basically tell him that they want him to be their scribe, to write down a bunch of shit.
Yeah.
And they teach him how to write. So he doesn't know how to write or read. And so he learns all this stuff from him. They teach him astronomy. And then
That seems like a pain in the ass. Like, we need a scribe. Let's go find a guy who can't read and write. And you know what I'm saying? It's like there's ulterior motives there. They don't really want a scribe. They want somebody. So they want him for something else. They want him to write all this shit down. But why do they have to teach? Why don't they go find somebody who can read and write to get a scribe? That's what you usually do.
yeah, I don't know. Why didn't they just do it?
Yeah,
It doesn't make any sense.
You guys can read and write. You know, I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense as him just being their scribe. It does make sense maybe if you, because I always thought that he was told to take, like, he was before the deluge, right? He was supposedly told to sort of compile all this information into these tomes and then to bury them beneath the various places. They would say beneath the floor of the temple of Jupiter or whatever, all this stuff, and then so that they could be retrieved after the deluge.
Right.
But I don't know if that's in the Book of Enoch.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like, okay, so the way it goes is I'm listening to this book, but I'm at work.
Yeah.
And so I know that there are parts of it that I miss, like completely, totally miss because
Yeah.
something's going on. Or like I take my headphones out, pause it, and then my phone's moving around in my pocket and it starts playing.
Oh
again.
yeah.
So I have to listen to it multiple times, and I've only gone through it twice.
Yeah.
But the main thing that really stuck out to me, so at this point I can't report on the story as like an authority on the story.
Okay.
Right? I don't know it that well.
Yeah.
But what I can say is this one part really jumped out at me, you know, and I'm just doing all this stuff at work, and I'm hearing him talk about this day-night cycle thing when he's being taught astronomy. And okay, so the part where he's been taken into the ship, like, or well, I'm calling it a ship automatically.
It's obviously a spaceship, guys.
Right. He's being taken into this whatever structure that the Watchers have, and he's taken up to see the Most High or whatever.
Yeah.
But there he's shown all kinds of stuff. So he sees lands, like distant lands and all this kind of stuff. And so it seems clear. And then he sees the gates in heaven and like the gates of this planet and the gates of that planet and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it literally sounds like they brought him into a spaceship and took him up into the sky and showed him shit.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. But like it gets to a point where one of the angels or one of the Watchers or whatever is going to teach him astronomy. And that's the part that really jumped out at me because we've been studying astronomy and we've been working on the Hill Hinge project.
That's right.
And so, you know, we're learning shit about the motions of the sun through the sky, and that's basically what he's being shown.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm listening to it, and it's basically like, okay, so you start on this day or whatever, and the daytime is equal to the nighttime. Well, obviously, that is
That's
the equinox.
Yeah.
Day and night are of equal parts. Like,
Right.
that's the way he describes them, as parts.
Okay.
And then he goes, and you wait 30 days, and then you look again, and the sun has moved, north or whatever, and the day is now this long, and the night is this long, and the night's getting longer, the day's getting shorter.
Yeah.
Then it goes the other way, and basically he's describing like, the sun, the Earth going through the seasons, and like the days getting shorter, the days getting longer. And at one point, he gets all the way to where he says the day is twice as long as the night. Basically, it's longer than the night by a double part, right? Like, or double the night.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, that's the solstice, because right after that it starts going back to where the day's getting shorter again. So I'm like, I know based on the research that we've recently been doing that depending on your latitude, the longest day, like, if you're at the North Pole, then, and he was told this by one of the angels, like, there are places in the world where a day is one half of the year and the night is the other half.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're all the way up in the North Pole, or you're all the way down in the South Pole, then a day is half the year and a night is half the year, pretty much. Right. So, I'm like, I know that there's a specific latitude that at the solstice, the day will be twice as long as the night.
Yeah.
And there's only going to be one of those in the northern hemisphere, which is supposedly where they were. I guess he could have been in the southern hemisphere. So I'm like, oh, I'll check it out. Turns out it's 50 degrees. It's roughly around 50 degrees north latitude, which is way up there. Like, Russ and I were looking at it on the map, and it's like goes through Russia and Canada,
China.
Yeah.
Europe, upper Europe.
So it's nowhere near the Fertile Crescent. It's nowhere near Israel.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things I wanted to talk about. If I ever got a chance to talk to the author, because his thought, he was talking about the possibility of like, polar shift, or the poles shifting on the planet, which is a theory that it's probably happened before.
Yeah.
But I don't really buy into that in terms of like recent human history. I don't.
Okay, so this is what Velikovsky talked about, right?
Yeah,
that was his whole thing. So, like, I'm reading that stuff again, and I'm like, man, that's really convincing. It's really convincing. Like, his whole, like, he's right about so many things, and I'm just like, wow.
The problem that I have with it is that if we had a polar shift, it's highly unlikely that after that, any monuments would be lined up with anything.
Yeah.
And all these ancient monuments are all lined up to shit. You know?
Well,
so it's like either they were all built after the pole shift, in which case this Book of Enoch is probably not from before.
Right. Maybe. I mean, like, that's one of the things that Larry Scranton is talking about.
Or it's extremely old.
Yeah.
And it's the oldest thing that we know of.
Yeah.
Because the other texts that we have are associated with cultures that have built stuff that's aligned.
Yeah.
So, like, this would be the only text that I know of that has a description in it that's astronomical. And, well, it doesn't matter what this is. It's like, if he's supposed to be in Israel, and that's the whole idea, it seems more probable to me that idea is wrong than that it's the only text known that is from a guy who wrote something down before the poles shifted, and then everything else we know of was after. That doesn't seem probable.
I agree with that. I don't think that him being on the 50th parallel or the 50th latitude or whatever is explained by a pole shift.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
that was the point of the author. Like, well, perhaps he was writing this down before the pole shift.
Yeah, no. I mean,
Israel was up at a place like
right. That's because he wants.
No. I'm sorry. That wasn't the opinion of this author. This is somebody else that when I was looking this up, I saw some other people who had written opinions about it. My bad, Andy.
So those people are
not you.
Yeah. Those people are just wanting him to stay in Israel. And like
probably,
so they're having to make a pole shift happen to put the Israel at 50 right. Or whatever. Well, I don't think I disagree with that as well. But I do think that, like, if there was some kind of rollover or pole shift or whatever, or even just a knocked off kilter, that I think that the current monuments were probably built right after it happened, partially because it happened. Okay. And
Yeah. Now, if that happened, I can see that. Yeah.
And so the pole shift is old, and the monuments are much older than we thought. And like Laird Scranton kind of goes through the whole thing. He's like, look, Velikovsky put this into very recent history, like relatively very recent, like 3,000 BC.
To me, all the main ones that that we know of that are have these badass alignments and stuff. There is evidence around those areas that all point to roughly around 12,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, right before the end of the last, or right after the end of the last ice age.
Yeah.
So, if there was a pole shift in that catastrophe, that would make sense.
Right.
But I don't know.
Yeah. And we know it was probably caused by a comet, right? The catastrophe, not necessarily
Probably,
pole shift.
yeah.
Well, and there's the whole thing with the pole shift is that it was a comet. It was Venus, right? Venus was cometary up until very recently. I mean, that you can look just as recent as like Copernicus, like 1500 AD. Copernicus's like records of Venus's movements in the sky do not in any way like conform to what we see now. So.
Right. So they think he's wrong, but that's where the electric universe comes in, and that works badass because they're, the idea is that these bodies can, like, once they get into a system, they will very quickly be
regularized,
ushered towards the point where they fit in to
Right.
to the basically the entire system of energy in that plasma stream.
Right, that works for that. Because there's a lot of astronomers that question Velikovsky's explanation, like, well, how did it get normalized? In thousands of years, it should be, and like Sagan went through this whole deal of like Sagan hated Velikovsky, like he did not like him at all, and like he did this whole bullshit where like the post predicting the past crap, right? Where he like does all these calculations of how extremely unlikely this is, right? Laird Scranton points out that he's like, well, kind of if you do that same thing for the universe in its entirety, like how ridiculously unlikely it is that the universe just so happened to be just perfect for us to be here, like you can kind of just using that same logic discount the existence of the whole universe. So that doesn't really work. Unlikely things happen all the time.
So one of the things I want to do to follow up on this, and I'll report back when I get the chance to do this, but I want to get on Google Earth and load up, what is that thing you gave me, that XLM file or whatever it is, KMX,
The KML,
the KML file
that has all the thousands and thousands of sites.
all these ancient sites, and I
Yeah.
want to get on the 50th parallel in the north, 50 degrees north, and just cruise around the world and look to see what sites are there.
Yeah.
Especially in the the eastern area, right?
Yeah.
And then go to the south, because dude, if they took him in a freaking ship where he could see like distant lands, because he describes like seeing these lands that he's never even imagined could have existed, right? And some of it almost sounds like they took him to different planets, like you know what I mean? It's like, it's crazy, but I don't know. But it's
Well, if it was pre-cataclysm, some of it might look like different planets when you've got these enormous.
but still,
megaplanets.
even it still does today. Like you go to different parts.
Yeah, you're like, holy shit.
It's like,
not
what
Earth.
is that?
yeah.
So it seems like they took him and
planet
showed him
just
all
ate
these
that
distant
helicopter.
lands, and like
Yeah.
in another part they're describing to him that the moon, the light of the moon, is actually the sun reflecting off of it.
Yeah.
They weren't flat earthers, by the way.
Right. Yeah. Take
But,
out flat earthers.
Yeah,
I'm
so
part of
and
the Flat Mars
he-
Society,
He's
by the way.
basically and he gives he says the guy's specific name, one of the Watchers. He's like one of the leaders of the Watchers who taught him about the moon. It's really badass.
Azazel.
I don't know. I can't remember what his name is, but yeah, like when he's describing the sun rising and the different night and day cycles.
Yeah.
I'm like, when they were teaching him this, they needed to do more than just to tell him exactly what he's writing down.
Yeah.
Like he understood it.
Right.
So how did they do that? They must have taken him to a hinge
Yeah.
and shown him like, watch the motions, right? Like
Yeah.
take him there
And this is how
once
you
a
can
month.
extrapolate if it's balls rolling around in space.
Right,
Yeah.
take him there once a month, show him, and because he talks about like the sun rising in gates and that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. I was telling you about this, and he uses these terms, gates and storehouses or whatever, and it's like his language didn't really have the words to describe it, or it's our it's the translations of it that didn't have the words to describe it.
Right.
Because I don't know what language he wrote it in.
Gates of heaven are a pretty common thing in ancient times. Like, they would consider certain things to be gates. And there was always a reason why it was looked at as a gate. That once you read it, you're like, oh, okay, I can see why they would call that a gate.
Right, but I was thinking about Stonehenge, right?
Yeah.
Who the fuck builds a Stonehenge?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking about Stonehenge, and it's like they made gates that the sun rose into, right? And that's what I was thinking, like, dude, he talks about the gates, and it's a perfect, it makes sense in terms of a gate, like, because it's coming through, this sort of passage or whatever, except that these actual astronomical observatories are built with gates.
Yeah.
Right? They're all big gates. They look like the little things on the bowling pin hats in the freaking Egyptians wear. Mm-hmm. And there's the sun disk coming through it, right? So that was just really cool. I think if there is a badass like hinge type or like well aligned sort of astronomical structure somewhere on one of the 50th degree parallels, that would be badass.
Siberia's in the 50th, right? It's pretty north. It's like,
I don't know. I need to look at it more closely because I just did that.
The 50 line was running alongside the, like, I would say just above the Canada-U.S. border, right? That's pretty far north. I mean, that's not Arctic Circle, but it's close. Like Siberia, right? Like Alaska. Parts of Alaska and Siberia are in the Arctic Circle, but there's a whole bunch of them that are in the, I don't know what it's called. It's not temperate or whatever. It's the area below the Arctic Circle between that and the temperate zones.
Yeah.
But anyway, the reason I'm saying this is because I remember, I must have read this on Ancient Origins. It was years ago, but they had this thing about this site that they found in Siberia, and it's like, I looked at it and I was like, okay, that was a lab, right? Because it's this beautiful, like, rock cut, gigantic blocks or whatever, and it's in the middle. It completely covers the island. An island is in this lake, right? So this is Siberia, which is like all frozen tundra and like hardcore. You got to be a badass to survive there now. But there's this enormous megalithic site that was never occupied. Like the researchers that have gone there and kind of dug around in there are like, there's no signs of any like they built this and just never used it, right? And I'm like, that was a laboratory or something. Like, it's clearly not something to be lived in, but that somebody built a facility, used it for whatever they're going to use it for, and then left, and we just have the remnants of it. And I mean, it goes to the edges of the island. Like, the island is the foundation of this thing.
Wow.
So like, if you left the building, you're in the water. There's nowhere to walk, right? So I'm like, how do they build it? Like, it's freezing there. Like, you can't, you know what I'm saying? Like,
well, I wonder what's under the water around it.
Yeah. It's one of those,
the top of a mountain.
one of those like super deep ancient Siberian lakes too, like big massive fresh water. It's like thousands of feet deep.
That's cool.
I'm like, how did they get an island in the middle of this 1,000-foot deep lake? Anyway, I looked at that. So when you were saying that, I was like, I wonder if this is where they went, because like that's in the right area.
Yeah.
And you could.
That's what I'm saying. We need to cruise that freaking 50th degree parallel, both north and south, because dude, South America.
Yeah.
Like there's got to be something down there.
Yeah.
And near the bottom.
Yeah.
Wherever it is. Like, so when I looked it up, it was, I just used a Wikipedia thing, like 50 degrees north latitude.
Yeah.
And it shows this sort of tiny picture of the whole world map with a 50-degree line on it.
Yeah.
And then when you click on the picture to enlarge it, the line's gone.
Yeah.
Because the line is just superimposed on the picture.
Yeah, the line's like a flash thing superimposed.
I was like, dang it.
Yeah.
So I haven't had more time, but I'm going to do this on Google Earth. Another interesting thing to do on Google Earth is to cruise the 33rd.
Yeah. 33rd is weird. Yeah. Moundsville.
But yeah, there's one other aspect of the story that I want to talk about that also brings in what I remember about the Sumerian tales with that concern the flood, Enki and Enlil, and so after reading the Book of Enoch, because it describes like a lot of other details about the flood and what was going on around it, and Noah and his life and how he came to be. So I just want to briefly talk about that and some of the strange, like the way these stories sort of conflict, but that might actually mean there was something deeper going on, in my opinion. So
I mean,
talk about that.
I did know that.
Break.
Yeah, it was surprising to me, the whole thing that Noah was like that he was not a regular human baby. That shit was surprising to me.
Yeah,
like I really was taken aback by that. I was like, wait, what? His dad's like, he's not mine.
Yeah.
That fucking bitch! God damn it!
All right.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break.
Yeah, I'll take a break.
No, wait. Let's keep going. Snakes. Limitless conversation by two limited individuals, and sometimes three, and sometimes four. Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
Higher
Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Coming to you from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science. And we're getting back to the Book of Enoch here just for a minute. One of the other aspects of it that I find really interesting is the birth of Noah. So stick with me in these names here. I'm trying to memorize them, but so Noah's father is Lamech, and he was married to I can't remember her name, but basically his father.
Not important. She was a woman.
His father Methuselah. Back then the fathers like chose wives for their sons or whatever. So so Methuselah picks Lamech's wife. And they have a son, and basically the story is that Lamech comes running to his father Methuselah, and he's just like, WTF, like, he came out and his skin was all bright, and then like he opened his eyes and they shined like the sun and lit up the whole room.
Wow.
Basically, he's describing
One of the shining ones.
what the Watchers look like to Enoch. Okay. Like their faces shone and their eyes were like fire. And literally in the book it says that when he opened his eyes, the room lit up, like it brightened the room, like the sun.
Wow.
That's what it says. So Lamech's like freaking out, and he goes to his father Methuselah and he's telling him all this, and he's like, "It's one of them. It's not a man. He's not like us. He's like them." And he's talking about the Watchers basically. And Lamech, the way the story goes is that Lamech tells him that he talked to Enoch about it and it was cool, right? It was supposed to be that way. Don't worry, it is your son.
Methuselah tells Lamech that, right?
I'm sorry. Yeah, Methuselah tells Lamech. What did I say?
You said Lamech tells him.
Methuselah tells Lamech that he's talked to Enoch about it and it's all good. And that it is his son and he's supposed to be that way. And the reason why he's that way is because he's going to do great things, and he's the chosen one to take mankind through the calamity that's to come, right?
Yeah.
Now, this part is talked about by the author of the book that I'm reading by, it's Andy McCracken. So Andy's thinking that this part of the book might have actually been written not by Enoch, but by Methuselah. And one of his reasonings is because it seems like Methuselah didn't really have a chance to go talk to Enoch about it. He just tells him like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, but blah, blah, blah. But I don't know. I disagree with that because...
You could have talked to him about it earlier.
Yeah, because if apparently Enoch knew all of this stuff was going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like when the father is picking the bride, they can make these types of plans come to fruition, okay? So my thought here is that this has happened before, or actually it happens later, really, and before.
Yep.
But in the story of Jesus, basically Mary is visited by an angel, and then she has a child.
Right.
So it's kind of the same way with the story of Noah, except there isn't really a story about her being visited by an angel. But the weird thing is that Noah appears to be a crossbreed between humans and the Watchers.
Right.
Which is against the law, according to God and the Watchers. Right? This is one of the reasons why Enoch was picked up in the first place, because there was all this bad stuff going on where the Watchers were had come down from heaven, and like 200 of them had decided, you know what, we're gonna break the law, and we're gonna go take men to be our wives, and we're gonna have babies, and those babies are gonna be giants. And
Take
they're
the
gonna,
daughters of men.
Yeah, I'm sorry. They take men to be their wives. Take the daughters of men to be their modern day.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Some men have uteruses.
Did I just really do that? I'm gonna edit that out. So yeah, they took the daughters of men to be their wives, and they had giants, and the giants just devoured the earth.
Yeah.
This pissed off God, so he decided to destroy it with a great flood. So this is like the sort of abridged story we're given in Genesis.
Yeah.
But basically, Enoch is picked up by these people, and he's shown all this stuff all this bad stuff that's happening to these watchers who disobey, and he's told by, the Most High and the watchers that these bad watchers that have chosen to take the daughters of men to be their wives and had families and had giants and all this stuff that were devouring the earth, they were all going to be punished, and they were all going to watch their families be killed in the great calamity to come. Right?
Yeah.
So he's being told all this stuff by these guys, and so he thinks apparently that the fallen, quote unquote fallen angels who mixed and mingled with men are really evil, and that they taught mankind all kinds of evil things like medicine and how to smelt metal,
metallurgy,
and all these evil things.
Making, and
right, terrible evil things.
Horrible evil things. Yeah.
So
Makeup.
it seems like the way Graham Hancock describes him, it sounds like Enoch was just a bigoted old shaman.
Yeah, that's right. A bigoted old shaman. Yeah.
And he didn't like the way the world was changing around him, right?
Yeah.
A bigoted old shaman. It's freaking great. But, okay, this is why this is strange, because if Methuselah really goes to Enoch and tells Enoch that Lamech just had a son with his wife who was chosen, and that son looks like one of the Watchers, then Enoch would think, okay,
if he was a bigoted old shaman.
if he was a bigoted old
he'd be
shaman,
like, well, that fucking bitch, blah, blah, yeah.
Right.
Laid with one of the...
and he would go to the Watchers and say, hey, there's crossbreeding going on down here. We need to find out the culprit and destroy them, right? That's not what happens.
Yeah.
Enoch tells
like, hey, it's cool.
Methuselah is like, no, dude, this is cool. This is the way it's supposed to be. And that boy is going to grow up to be a man, and he's going to be the one that like saves the human race from the destruction.
Yeah. And the Bible says that he was righteous in all his generations.
Okay,
which is weird,
so
right?
Right, but this is the thing. In the Sumerian tale, the characters that make up the people that would have taken Enoch initially up and said that, the angels should not mix with the daughters of men and all that, that would be Enlil's group.
Right.
Right? The ones that came down and mixed with mankind and all that, that would be Enki's group.
Yeah.
And then in the Sumerian tale, it's Enlil that doesn't want any of mankind or any of the mixed breeds to know that the calamity is coming.
That's right.
And it's Enki that breaks those rules and goes and finds Unishtapim or whatever is freaking Unishtapim and tells him across the wall, like he's talking to the wall, and he's like, hey,
not
wall.
breaking the vow. Hey, wall, you should probably build a boat, wall.
Right.
If I was you, wall, I'd build a boat.
I'd build a boat about this size and about that size.
Yeah, I'd probably make it this big and that big,
And
wall.
then I'd go gather up all the DNA in the planet and put it in there.
I'd tear you down,
As a
wall.
matter of fact, I'd go break into this really great building that Enki built that's full of all that DNA. And you can take it all and put it in that boat.
That's what I'd do if I was you, wall.
Right, so Enki is the one who would have been on the side of the fallen, who crossbred with the Adamu.
Yeah. Trying to raise them, basically.
Right, and taught him all the knowledge and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a problem here. And so what I was thinking after listening to this part of the book is that what if, like, at some point, Enki's people got to Enoch? Like, he realizes, like, wait a minute, this whole situation that I was told before is bullshit.
Yeah.
And all mankind is going to be destroyed, which means all of his descendants.
Yeah.
So he must have switched sides eventually, and like he knew about this deal that there was going to be this sort of crossbred hybrid, and that was the chosen person to to save mankind from the flood.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense that Enoch like stayed on that same course the whole time, even though there's not really anything in the book that says that he didn't.
Right. Well, like one thing I considered after we talked about this before, I was like, okay, maybe Enoch was never on that side. But dude, when a god tells you go to these people and tell them they're fucking pissing me off, like you don't say no, right? You go, like he's like a glowing giant god, so you go and you do what he says.
He's all powerful and all this.
Right. So you go and you're like, blah blah blah. He says you're doing the wrong thing, right? And you're coming off as a bigoted old shaman, but really that's not what you want. But you can't not do it.
Right. So it's like that's exactly what I'm thinking. It's like later he's actually making secret plans.
Right. He gets in with Enki. So like Enki finds out that Enlil's using him for everything. So Enki is of course going to be interested in this guy, right? And then word would be coming back to him from his people, like this dude just showed up and he was all blah blah blah.
Right.
So like Enki would eventually make contact with Enoch, I think, you know, and then Enoch would be like, thank God, because like. Fuck.
So this is why I think, and I don't think that the idea of the Pillars of Enoch is in Enoch's book,
right?
But I think that it's possible that they picked him up to make him a scribe, to like make him basically feed him a bunch of propaganda to go spread it among men and just tell them all this crap to make him like, here, we're going to teach you astronomy, we're going to teach you some other stuff, but don't mess with metals and don't mess with medicine or anything. Go tell all these people exactly what we tell you to tell them. Write it all down.
Yeah.
So he starts doing their bidding, but because they taught him something, they taught him language, he starts reading and starts learning other shit.
Yeah.
And he starts figuring out like, dude, this is fucked up.
Yeah,
like,
what's wrong with this digging up metal? Like, what's wrong with that?
Right, that's kind of my idea, and that's one of the things I would really like to talk to the author of this.
Adam, is it
Andy?
Adam?
Andy McCracken. McCracken.
Yeah, I'm talking about the Kraken.
Because dude, that
from
part
the
of the
Kraken,
story, that part of like the Sumerian myths or whatever, quote unquote myths, is
myth just means story. So yeah.
I think that's really interesting, but
like I think the idea of the Pillars of Enoch again is something that it's sort of like it's legend building after he's gone, right?
Yeah.
Like they call them the Pillars of Enoch because Enoch has come to symbolize all this human knowledge because he got it from the gods, and you know, and then like
I also think we don't have everything that he wrote, because this book is like basically like a version that was copied and taken to Ethiopia from some older texts, right? And probably translated.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what language they were writing in.
Well, we have
like the Watchers.
Oh yeah, no. But we have hold on. The gate is calling me. That means the show observer is here. I just let him in. I'm glad I saw that. We have the apocryphal texts in the two places where they found all the one of them is called the the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the other one I can never pronounce it. The Nag Hammadi, whatever library.
Yeah.
Okay, in those collections, one of them contained original Enochian texts, right? Mm-hmm. So for a long time, it was considered that the book the Ethiopians had was not a real biblical. That people just didn't believe that was a real biblical text, right? But now that we found them in these groupings of ancient texts, where we know they're all really old and they were stashed there by people who then were killed, you know. So now it's
it makes that's why the Ethiopic version is like the best, because it was the most well preserved.
Right, it was most well preserved, and they So there's the argument that like, well, we don't know how many times it's been translated because they've had it forever, whereas what we see from the Dead Sea Scrolls has never been translated. It's written in the original, you know, or maybe it was just copied. It's a copy of one of the originals, but so there's less translations in between now and then, you know. But still, like I
think it's in one of those versions, because I was the first time I ever read some of the Book of Enoch was not the Ethiopian version. It was because I saw that and I was like, what is that?
What are the Ethiopians?
And so I read the other ones on sacredtext.com, and in those is when he's describing how they took him up and he saw the curvature of the world, of the earth.
He sees the blanket. He describes it as like a quilt or whatever. Yeah.
And then it seems like he's describing them taking him and showing him different planets.
Yeah.
And then like they flew him to like these far off lands and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that was in the old version, folks. Like,
Yeah.
That's in the non-translated, old versions. It's like directly being translated from the ancient.
Those are really weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
He tries to appeal for one of the angels that's being tortured in the prison in one of those books too.
Yeah.
And they're just like, no.
Yeah, no. No, he's going to be tortured forever. Yeah. Yeah. Real nice people, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because and you kind of get the idea, I did anyway, that the Watchers are not the same necessarily, or maybe they're at different ranks or something. Like the Watchers are set aside, and Sitchin did this too. He's viewed the Watchers as being different from these other groups.
Right. So the Most High, like that guy, his whole face was like so bright, that you couldn't even look at it.
Yeah.
It was blinding,
right,
to look at him. And then the Watchers, the angels, were not.
Yeah. They were still
their
bright.
Their skin was light and their eyes glowed. And
yeah.
And but then there are the cherubim and like all these, and
the seraphim.
I got the idea that the cherubim were like robots.
Yeah,
they're like little robots or
constructs.
whatever. Because they like there are certain cherubim that just do like this one task over and over and over and over.
Right. And like when you look at the old carvings, the things standing on guarding the gates, the bird guys, or those are cherubim. Those are so like they can be huge, and like it was a cherubim that was set to guard the gate to the Garden of Eden.
And in like I guess the Renaissance type paintings, the cherubim are all the little naked babies.
Yeah, I know. It's like what? How did they become naked babies from giant bird things with lasers? What does it deal with the babies? But of course, I saw that I did read something that was saying that they look like. The Renaissance people would paint them as being infants, but they were enormous. Like the idea was that it was a like looked like a baby, but it was like huge, right? If you ever saw somebody next to it, they consider them to be babies, but they were enormous. Like that would be pretty scary. Like a giant
that sounds
12-foot
like
baby.
Sort of like a robot.
Yeah,
it's like
you could just make them whatever.
But I mean, like think about AI for example. Like AI is
childlike.
like always a child.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And it's single-minded.
Yeah.
Like babies are, feed me, sleep, shit.
Yeah.
They're either screaming or they're sleeping. Yeah.
Or both.
Right. That's right. Oh, fuck. Yeah. It's interesting, though, to listen to you talk about the Book of Enoch. And of course, like I said, I've been reading the Velikovsky heresies, and I'm thinking of all this stuff that correlates. And Velikovsky did set out to. One of the things that pissed off the scientific community so much about what he did was he was basically saying, like, look at all these biblical legends.
Yeah.
And then look at all these. He did comparative mythology, right? All over the world, he finds all these, and he's like, these are common. These are similar, right? And then he shows you how he basically uses all that. This is what pissed him off. He uses all this what science considers to basically be fairy tales to come up with a brand new astronomical theory of the formation of the solar system, or to what we see today, right?
Right.
He's like, you guys have all these anomalies that you can't explain. Well, look at all these myths; they explain it perfectly, right?
Yeah.
And that just pissed off the scientific community so much, dude.
But that's kind of like, I love that, and that's kind of what my goal is too. Is like I want to read all these
the scientific community. So
yeah. I want to read all these texts, and like I want to think about them in like that mindset, like I don't want to limit the technology that they might have had, right? That might have existed at the time. Like if you automatically assume butt flap, then all of these ancient texts are really difficult to understand.
Yeah.
But if you get rid of that assumption,
right,
and say, well, I'm not going to like
arbitrarily apply,
arbitrarily like rule out high technology, and then him being led into a crystal room with tongues of fire sticking out of the walls and the ceiling. Yeah, I'm like glass and artificial light.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, what the light bulb sticking out of my ceiling right now would be described as a snake, a serpent of fire, because it's one of those little freaking spaghetti light bulbs. Yeah. Right? If some ancient butt flap dude came in here, he'd be like, "There's a serpent of fire on your ceiling."
Right. Exactly.
Like, yeah, it's called a light bulb, and then he wouldn't have a word for that.
Yeah, and like
in his language,
I come outside wearing a headlamp, and I'm a cyclops with a glowing eye, right? You know, because that's all you see is like this dark figure with this glowing eye.
Which is that's the thing too, is that like this is so Enlil style to like take somebody who's just a freaking sheep herder somewhere who's never seen anything and just like scoop them up in all this glory and fire and all this crazy shit and just take them
Blow
into
their
a
minds.
completely different world.
Yeah.
And then put on the biggest, brightest headlamp you have and say, okay, bring him into the room. And
Yeah.
like, just try to talk to him
Blind
while you're
him.
blinding him with the light. And like, you got a microphone and shit, and you're like,
Yeah.
blah, blah.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
You will be my scribe. You cannot look at my face.
Yeah.
Okay, now take him out of the room.
It's the God Gambit.
Right? It's the Wizard of Oz, dude.
Yeah.
Like, it's straight up. So it's just like in Lil's style to do that with somebody and then make them a scribe and then like just totally brainwash them with
Yeah.
all this power and awe.
Yeah.
And then send them down to tell the story that he wants them to tell.
Right. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what happened. If you read the Book of Revelation, that's exactly what that looks like.
Yeah.
And when if you read that really carefully, you realize that everything that he sees is they're actually showing it to him. Like he describes it as being on a scroll or something, but the images
Yeah.
move, and I'm like, okay, so they're showing him a screen. They're like, look, all this stuff is going to happen in the future. You're seeing all this shit. Write down what you see,
Right.
and he writes it down as though he was there, but he was actually viewing it on some kind of,
Yeah.
It's and it's like it's the
And
same
if they
deal.
give him a little bit of psychedelics and they do it, then
Right.
it's like even that much more powerful.
Right, they're
And
just
the
like,
guy's
oh my
mind,
god,
right?
yeah, and like they pulled him out of prison, where he's been languishing in a prison for all this time, and they give him some psychedelic drugs, and then show him a fucking view screen. It's gonna blow his mind, right? Yeah, it's very typical of the Enlil way, like the visions of Fatima. Those three children that did that, they were like that. They're peasants, the wrong word, but they were very poor, not educated. The guy who who had the vision of Guadalupe, right? The vision of Mary that showed up and told him to go to the bishop
Right.
and get the church. It was the same deal. Like didn't know how to read, didn't know how to write. It was a peasant,
Yeah.
uneducated. It happens over and over and over. They're picking those people on purpose. Why do they always appear to weirdos? It's like
Yeah.
it's the same. It's like yes, they're picking them on purpose because they're uneducated, because they want to make an impression, right?
Yeah.
They want somebody easy to brainwash. They don't want
That's
to.
why, like in the new Star Trek series, right?
Yeah.
There's the one where they're on this planet and they're all running, and there's this group of some of the indigenous population or whatever that are following. They've got all these weird spears and they, and they run and they get on the Starship Enterprise just comes out of the ocean.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, and they all start like bowing down. So it's like it's against their policy to show themselves to these people because it will alter
It totally changes everything. Yeah.
right. It changes everything, and it's like
The Prime Directive is what that's called.
yeah. So that's like
So Enlil is violating the Prime Directive over and over and over and over and over
that's
and over.
right.
Yeah.
Well, Enki did too, but he was like, let's bring him into the fold completely.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Let's show them the technology and show them that you can do this. This is science.
Yeah.
Enlil's way was like, don't show them any of the science. That knowledge is forbidden
Only
to them.
only showing the science to blow their minds.
Right.
Yeah.
To make them your quote unquote prophet.
Right. And
Right.
it's not even really showing them the science. He's showing them the results of science.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
It's
One is deeply manipulative. The other one is like, no, let's bring them in with us and like see
Right.
what they've got. Like he did that with Adapa. Like he took him everywhere with him.
Yeah.
And then like Adapa gets invited to go to the House of Millions of Years, whatever, to go up to heaven. And Inky's like, okay, dude, like I can't make you not go, but I don't think you should go, but you have to go. But when you go there, be careful with this and this and this and all.
Yeah.
Because he's afraid that they're going to do the same shit to Adapa that they've done to all these other humans. So he tells him, don't eat anything, don't drink anything, and he knowing that that's going to offend Anu, like offers him food, and Adapa's like, no, right? Because
Right, but he doesn't want him to get drugged.
Yeah, he doesn't want him to
And
get
then
drugged.
shown some propaganda.
And then Anu tells him, if you would have eaten it, you would have been immortal. So of course Adapa goes back pissed off at Inky,
Right.
And Inky's like, no, that's not what would have happened. Like it
Yeah.
wouldn't have made you a god. Like, but yeah, there's you can see all that shit in those rivalries. But yeah, I keep thinking about this Velikovsky stuff and his idea about these cataclysms or whatever. It makes sense when you think of it in terms of like so we have all these myths, right? Like the Pallas Athena or Venus being birthed from the head of Jupiter.
Yeah.
Or Zeus, that's the Greek version or whatever. That's a weird story. Like no other god does that, right? All the gods are in place and present in their stories. Or they go back into the most ancient times, right? Even though the newest pantheon, who had defeated the Kronos, the Titans, those guys had defeated the original ones. They're still considered to be there for a long, long time. Like the Greeks, But Athena actually shows up in their time. Like she's not there before that, and then she shows up, right? And this is one of the things that Velikovsky says is like this is. and and like you were saying, gods are planets, right?
Yeah, or just heavenly bodies, right?
Right.
They're,
So Venus is not in any texts previous to this certain period. Like Velikovsky went and looked for this, right? And he's like, there's no Venus. Okay, but there is Metis, who is the Greek mother of Venus, but she is consumed by Zeus before Venus is born. And that is kind of like the Sumerian story
Right.
of Tiamat, right?
Tiamat and
Marduk, yeah.
Or not Marduk, Nibiru.
Yeah, it became Marduk from the Babylonians.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, it's weird how that works out. And like, so Velikovsky's basically like, well, if Metis was and it says that Metis, Venus's mother, was, she was fertile, she was pregnant with Venus. And then she gets eaten by Zeus, and then Venus is birthed from his head, right? And you're like, what? What the fuck? He's like, "Help!" And then she's like, "Bleak," comes out of his forehead. And that's a weird image. But if you think of it in terms of gods or planets, then you say, okay, so something cataclysmic happened.
Mm-hmm.
But then, so he goes through all these myths, and he shows it, like the Book of Jubilees is weird, right? And it's got this 52-year period. A jubilee is a 52-year period, right? Where in Jewish law, at the time, in Jewish law, they had this deal where when the Jubilee was coming up, when the end of the Jubilee was coming up, all debts were forgiven, like if you were renting a place, you had to leave, like everything was reset to zero.
Yeah.
Right? Everything was reset to zero, and they would do this before, like right up to the end of the, like, so the Jubilee end is coming up, and everybody would do this. They would reset everything in their culture. Okay? And then there was this 3-day waiting period where they all were kind of like breathless and waiting to see if the world would be destroyed. And if it wasn't, they would have this enormous jubilee, this gigantic celebration that it wasn't destroyed. So it's like, you can kind of see like, okay, why are they doing that? Because something every 52 years was wiping culture out and erasing everything to zero. And so they started doing it on purpose to beg the gods to not, like, they're like, if this is what you want, we'll do it. Stop killing all of us, right? So every 52 years, they would in their culture, they would erase everything and make it all go back to zero, like it would have if they would have been destroyed, but nobody dies.
Dude, that's crazy. So that's making me think like 52. What do I know about 52?
52 weeks in a year.
Cards.
Yeah, and 52 cards. 52 weeks in a year, 52 cards in a deck. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, 52 weeks in a year, 52 cards in a deck. And
Yeah.
then, like, makes me think of the tarot and like the whole path of the fool.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like all of those things come from like ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
You know, the symbolism in ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
And then like the path of the fool has like these areas of like destruction and then renewal and all this kind of shit.
Yes, that's right. And I think 52 is also like, if you take half of 72 and then half of that and then add them together, I think you get 52. I'm not sure. I could be wrong on that one. Half of 72, which is 46.
36. No?
What? Is it 36?
Yeah, 36.
36, yeah. And then you half that again, which is 50, 16. I don't know. I could be wrong. 36 plus 16 is
18. 18 and 36.
Oh, okay.
Right?
I don't know. I didn't do the math. / did not do the math.
Well, I'm just going to double check the math here.
Anyway, yeah, so there's the weird thing with the Jubilees, and there's the Book of Jubilees, which is an apocryphal text, okay? It describes all this stuff. The Book of Jasher also. Like, in the actual canonical Bible, the Book of Jasher and the Book of Jubilees are mentioned. They're cited, you know. And they found them with the Dead Sea Scrolls. But yeah, so that the whole thing with the Jubilee is weird, but it's
54.
54, yeah. Which is right. That's like when you include the 2 jokers in your deck card, you have 54 cards.
That's right. Nice one. Nice.
Snake through that one. So, like, that implies some kind of recurring. I mean, think about that. Like, a cataclysm that wiped everything out every 52 years? Like, fuck. Okay? So, and like we were saying before, Copernicus and all these, and like the further back in time you go, if you look at these otherwise well-respected astronomers that were making all these measurements, and you go like China and everything, like these people thousands of years ago, who otherwise made enormously meticulous records of movements in the sky, that agrees with all of our records or whatever. But then you look at what they said about Venus, and they're just way off, right? And they're just like, people are like, okay, they were totally wrong. And they try to say, well, it was copying errors compounding copying errors. Like every time a scribe copied the Venus parts, he would get something wrong, and then the next guy would get more things wrong, and then until it was just
maybe it was the Mandela effect. They just all remembered it wrong one day.
Yeah. There's also a problem with the
In the same way.
That's right, in the same way. And then later on, they did that again, and it got worse. There's also a problem with the eclipses, right? So there's records of eclipses going back, right, thousands and thousands of years. They found records for, where people were recording an eclipse happen, like a total full solar eclipse happened on this day, right? Well, you reach the same period where everybody changed their calendars. That is the demarcation of where previous to that, none of the eclipses that were recorded line up with what we are
like
looking
if we
for.
reverse the process.
Yeah, like we're going backwards, they stop lining up, right? And that,
okay, that's when it was 360-day a year.
That's right. Laird Scranton and Velikovsky point out that the reason this happened is because previous to that, the years were we're doing it wrong.
But that makes sense that if we get a new planet that shows up, that's put in position in our solar system, all the rest of the planetary,
there's a big adjustments have to be made.
Yeah, all the adjustments have to be made.
But also, Venus made an enormously close pass to Earth, and Velikovsky thinks that, based on everything that he found, and I don't have all the data, but he basically implies that so Venus didn't impact, but it came so close that it effectively so what people think of the pole shift is just Venus passing by and knocking Earth over sideways, okay? Mm-hmm. So it basically Earth was maybe closer to being almost straight up and down in terms of its axis. Venus comes by and knocks it over 20 degrees or something like that and gives it the wobble. Now it's wobbling and shit like that. This also sort of goes along with these ideas stemming from ancient times that everything's out of kilter, that stuff is not in alignment anymore, that we're in this age where everything is not divine. It's no longer part of the divine plan. It's been knocked.
Yeah.
So everything is not, they would say illusion, but they were saying basically that we have this enormous debt of evil being not godlike, not part of the original plan of the universe, mm-hmm. right? And we're all being affected by it all the time. We're no longer in harmony with the universe because something came by and fucking, almost killed everything, but left us tilted and cracked and broken in terms of the harmony of the universe. And so Earth is disharmonious, right? And Mars does go back in the records as far as you can see, but it was never considered until after this period that Velikovsky is pointing out. It was never considered to be dangerous. Well, it became the god of war after this period, the psychotic god of war Ares, right? Mars became Ares, because if you think about it, Athena is a goddess of war and love, right, or whatever, and she's really tactical and she's brilliant or whatever. But Mars is just psycho. He's indiscriminate destruction, depicted as crazy. All the bad things about war is Mars. But he wasn't like that until this period, and then after that, he becomes this just agent of destruction, indiscriminate destruction, and revels in it, right? So Velikovsky is saying that Venus also made a close pass to Mars. That's why Mars is missing half of its freaking crust on one side, because he says that it not a close pass, it actually hit. It impacted.
The Electric Universe guy, Wal Thornhill.
Yeah.
Actually did a lot of work with Velikovsky.
Yeah.
And they apparently he got, he started working on the Electric Universe idea, and then.
And Velikovsky was into that too.
Right.
Yeah.
But he pointed out to some of the he doesn't think that collisions are even possible.
Right. Yeah.
That it's because because the
but the energy of the collision would still be there. It would just take place.
Right. It would take place in electrical
discharges. Venus would be shunted away from Mars because but the
that
energy,
huge freaking gash on the it's
that enormous canyon.
It's a lightning sky. It's wall.
But Mars does have what's called I can't remember, but it's basically it's a wall, right? It's a wall that goes all the way around it. It's not on the equator; it's tilted. But there's this 1,000, or maybe it's a mile. It's a really high, freaking straight up cliff wall that goes it circumnavigates the entire planet, And that basically implies that, like, on one side of it, a huge amount of its crust just got blown off of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the only thing that could possibly do that is an enormous impact with a body of almost the same size, which is Mars and Venus, right? So if the energy of the impact doesn't have to be directly from the planet, because that doesn't make sense.
And Earth was caught in the middle, man.
Yeah. Well, so Venus makes a close pass to Earth, according to Velikovsky, and like knocks us out of kilter. But after Venus and Mars have their encounter, now Mars like Mars and Earth are like having these multiple. This is the Jubilees. Every 52 years, they're having this conjunction that is close as fuck, and it's causing all this messed up shit. Well, over time, it's not as close, right? But they would see it getting enormous and red in the sky, and they'd be like, "Oh my god, the god of war." But Mars was not a comet. They all knew it was a planet, but they thought Venus was a comet. They called it the bearded. They said that it had a beard or a tail,
Yeah.
But it normalized itself and stopped being dangerous. But Mars was totally normal and then suddenly became dangerous and psychotic, and they had these constant interactions with it, and we still have this. This is the weird thing. Both Earth with Mars and with Venus have these conjunctive periods, and with Venus it's really strange because every time they're in, is it aphelion? I never remember if it's perihelion or aphelion when they're the closest to each other, the closest approach. When Venus and Earth have their closest approach, every fucking time, they are tidally locked. The same sides of the planets always are facing each other when they have their closest approach, which implies that they had a long time ago a really close approach that tidally locked them into that.
Oh my god, that's badass, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, that's when I read that I was like, holy shit.
Freaking awesome.
Yeah. So we need to take another break, and Show Observer is here. I think he's outside. So we're going to take a break, and then when we come back, we should have him in the studio with us. So we will be back with Snake. Our pyramids tied behind our backs just to make it square. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast coming to you for the second hour, and we have the official of Show Observer now officially observing the show in studio,
in house.
That's right, making the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube into a round table somehow. I'm not really sure how that works. So we've been talking about Enoch and Velikovsky. Clearly the same guy.
Obvious connection.
That's right. The pillars of Velikovsky. But yeah, I have this interesting part from the book from Larry Scranton, which is, again, it's called the Velikovsky Heresies. I was going to go through this real quick. It's just really interesting how he says this. So he says, another likely reason for the intensity of the reaction to Worlds in Collision was that the book committed what amounted to an inexcusable faux pas in 1950. Both its thesis and its author brazenly dared to cross the invisible boundaries that are traditionally observed between a number of different academic disciplines. In doing so, Velikovsky may have thrown many scholars within those disciplines off balance by essentially challenging many of their key assumptions on the basis of evidence that was drawn from fields other than their own. Astronomers of the day were not accustomed to having to give account for themselves or their theories to historians. Nor were they inclined to accept fragmentary testimony or ancient references that had been obscured by the sands of time and framed in some archaic language on the same footing as traditional empirical scientific evidence. Consequently, few may have known quite how to respond to what they saw as an unorthodox attack on their field of study, or felt up to the more challenging task of trying to definitively refute Velikovsky's broader theory, portions of which may have fallen outside of their own field. In Worlds in Collision at its simplest, Velikovsky posited, based on statements and observations extracted from written texts, myths, words, and engraved artifacts of ancient cultures from around the globe, that, contrary to prevailing scientific belief, the planet Venus, which is thought by traditional scientists to be billions of years old, must be a relatively recent addition to our family of planets. Furthermore, he proposed that Venus had made its first appearance in our solar system a mere 3,500 years ago, around 1500 BCE, and then behaved not as we would expect a planet to behave, but rather like a brilliant comet. Venus was described by several ancient cultures as having a long tail or beard, and was said to have brightened the entire heavens, moving erratically across the sky and creating havoc for centuries prior to settling down into its familiar role as one of the most orderly planets in the solar system. Furthermore, it was Velikovsky's personal contention that the movements of this comet could explain and might ultimately provide a historical basis for many of the seemingly miraculous events of the Bible, reported to have occurred at the time of the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt. No wonder that this would seem to the average scientist of the day as a frontal assault on science and as a wholesale attempt to reassert what he or she saw as an outmoded religious paradigm, one that the scientific community had worked diligently for decades or even centuries to supplant.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why they flipped out.
Way to piss him off, bro.
That's right.
Do it again.
Yeah. Where's the next guy? But yeah, this is a great book. Basically the premise of the book that Larry Grant wrote, the Velikovsky Heresies, is he writes it. It's fairly recent. I think it's like 2012, 2014, something like that. And he's basically like, okay, so Velikovsky was 1950, Worlds in Collision was 1950. Like, we have a lot of scientific data that was not available at the time or during the entire quote-unquote Velikovsky affair, which went into the 80s with Carl Sagan and shit. We have a lot of data that was not available to them at the time, and he's like, so I propose to look at this new scientific data and look at Velikovsky's old thing and see, like, was he, because there are points, like, Velikovsky, at least, first of all, he was a trained scientist, okay? He was not a non-scientist or a layman or whatever, like Sitchin. They always say Sitchin wasn't a scientist. Well, Velikovsky was trained, he was a scientist, psychology and stuff like that. So they would say soft science or whatever. But still, he was a trained scientist. He understood the methodology. Mm-hmm. And when he proposed his theory, he did what most scientists don't do anymore, which is give you the falsification. Like, if this is found to be true, then everything I said is wrong. Right? And he did that like multiple times. And like, so Scranton's going through there, like, here are these really pivotal points in his theory where if we can say that, if we can find any data that says that isn't possible, the whole thing is dropped. And he goes through the entire book and doesn't find anything. Like, he's like, no, this actually, points to it being possible. Like, he goes through the whole thing with Venus. There's nothing about Venus that we know with all the data that we have now, with all the orbiters we've sent and everything like that, that says that it couldn't be what he said it was. And actually, most of it points to it probably being what he said it was. You know how we've gone through, one of the things we do on this show is point out how we're always fucking wrong about everything all the time, like mainstream science, right? Like it annoys me when people are taking like the scientific model of something. Like I was having this discussion over the remote viewing of Mars. Remember that? I read the guy remote viewed Mars. There was this discussion online where the guy was like, that's impossible. Like, and he starts telling everybody how Mars was a billion years ago. And I'm like, well, that's based on the current scientific model, and like the only thing we know empirically about Mars is everything they thought about it is wrong, right? So you're taking the stuff that hasn't been looked at yet and saying that it's still true, right? In other words, we haven't been able to look at those things to see if they're right or wrong yet, but everything else that we've been able to look at has been surprising and shown that what we thought was wrong. But you're saying, but everything else we haven't confirmed yet, we just consider it to be true. That's bullshit, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We should actually consider the model to be completely wrong. And like most of science shows that what we think about things before we actually are able to go look at it empirically is fucking wrong. Like, 99.99% of the time. So
evidence-based science is hard.
It's hard if you have built a whole career and everything on conjecture and stacks of assumptions, right, of this model that you've built, and then when somebody goes and actually gets empirical data and then shows that all of that's wrong, that's hard for a lot of people. They don't like that.
I always look at it as like spending a lot of time making a badass paper airplane, and then you go to throw it and just drops straight into the ground.
And you're just in denial. That didn't happen.
That didn't happen.
My model is badass.
Yeah,
just hang it up. Awesome. I'm just gonna hang it up like in flight.
There's a ceiling fan on. Somebody turn that fan off. Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Yeah. So like Velikovsky's ideas are not. He doesn't do that. He doesn't take all these scientific conventions and assumes they're correct, right? He looks instead at all this actual evidence. It may be not empirical, but it is empirical for the people who recorded it.
Right.
Right? That's the thing, is like, they're like, well, that's myth and legend. I'm like, but that's also a model that you have made, right?
Yeah.
Current science has made a model of all this ancient wisdom and called it mythology and made up fairy tale bullshit. That's their model of it. They don't have any empirical evidence that is true.
Right.
Whereas the people who are writing those myths, quote unquote legends and all that shit, were saying this is empirical shit. We saw this happening in the sky, right? So current science model of that shit is that it's not empirical, and there's no empirical data for that. That's all I'm saying.
And the crazy thing about that is that they'll give complete, credence and applause to all their other astronomy. Like, it's amazing how well they were able to chart the stars, and
Right,
predict things and know things, but these things are absolute nonsense because butt flaps make you lie.
Right. Yeah. Butt flaps make you lie. Well, there's also like the issue of they're constantly surprised at how well they did stuff. Right? Like there's this sort of constant sort of wide-eyed surprise at how amazing the astronomy of the ancients was. And I'm like, why are you still amazed by this? Like, there is no ancient culture that we found that built anything that was not fucking badass at astronomy, or at least had some elements of it that were badass at it,
Yeah.
That seem to have amazing astronomical data that we don't even know where it came from. Like, even now we have, there are tribes that don't do any astronomy. They live in the fucking jungle, they can't see the stars, but they have this astronomical information from their distant past.
Yeah, like
that's
that,
like anomalous.
What was that? We reported on that artifact they found that had trigonometry tables written on it or whatever, right? From Sumer or something.
Yeah, and they're like, nah. That's right. They found out that those guys were doing trigonometry, which made them able to do the spherical trigonometry
Right.
to be able to map the world, which they
Right.
thought was not even possible until much more recently.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, to be able to do the projections and
And the table that was written or whatever it was, because I don't know that shit, but whatever it was more accurate.
That's right.
Than this is actually a better formula than our modern day shit.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the way that they were figuring it all out and shit, they were like, holy shit, this is kind of better than
Actually,
ours.
no, it wasn't better than ours today. It was better than
like 1850,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, better than all the way up to very recently. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Now, I don't have the research to back this up, but neither do they, and they say shit all the time.
Yeah, it's fine. You can say it.
But as far as I know, and I'm sure I'd hear about it, we have yet to find math from the ancient world and gone, well, they had that wrong.
Right.
Like, it's always right,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah, and there's a what?
except for the qubit.
Actually, their math on that was always good. It's the
Right.
lengths.
They
Yeah.
can't figure it out.
Right. That's right. It's a ratio, guys. No, like they have all the. Well, they don't have a lot of them, but the sticks, the sticks that they call qubits, because they think of it as where's their measuring stick? You don't need a measuring stick if it's a ratio. Like, you were the one that pointed this out to me, because I was like,
Yeah.
well, the qubits are varying lengths, and you look at the hash marks that they have on them, and like that's not even.
Right.
You're like, well, it's a ratio. It doesn't matter. Like, you could just arbitrarily make one to give you demarcations for the ratio. And I was like, oh. Yeah, that's right. You don't have to have because we have all these standards of measure.
Right.
Right. We have these things that are sitting in these freaking vaults and, floating in magnetic fields to make them never change or whatever. This is how much a gram is, and this is how long this is.
Right.
They
But
didn't.
if you had I made this set of blocks for Soul.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
My son, and the way I cut them is the golden ratio.
Yeah.
Right. The rectangular side of it is the golden ratio.
Yeah.
And so if you build something out of it, like lining them up straight, right, where
Yeah.
they make a rectangle, they'll make the golden ratio
Again, yeah.
again, right, 5x3 or
Yeah.
whatever. And so then you can hold one of the blocks in your hand and
Superimpose
stand
it.
over it,
Yeah.
stand over the large rectangle you made on the floor, and bring that block closer to your eye until it perfectly fills
Yeah.
the rectangle on
Perfectly
the floor.
occults it. Yeah.
Right? So it gives you that sense of proportion. And then you could basically say from there that the distance from your eye to the block, and then the distance from the surface of the block down to the,
Yeah,
to
it's
the
also
rectangle
the
on the
same
floor
ratio.
is the golden ratio.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter what length your qubit stick is, as long as it has all the ratios on it.
Right. That's what I was
Because you
saying.
could stand back and move it to your eye and see that what you're building is the proper freaking proportions.
Yeah. I remember we were figuring out this about the pyramid. You're like, wait, if I bring a model
Yeah, exactly.
of the pyramid and I hold it out, then I'll be able to tell that I'm 10 miles away. Like, yeah.
Yeah, if it was a scale, right?
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit, that's badass. Like, if I know what the scale of my model is, then
Yeah.
I can tell how far away from the pyramid is by measuring how far away my little pyramid is from my
your
eyeball.
eye. That's right.
freaking awesome.
When it is perfectly occulting the Great Pyramid out there, you're like, okay, that tells me how far away I am from the actual thing.
That's so freaking cool.
And I mean, it makes way more sense. Like if you think about, impossible blocks, like you're gonna seriously go out and measure it like with a tape.
Yeah.
No, just compare them to each other.
It's really hard,
Set your
especially
frame
when
of
it's
reference.
windy.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have this problem all the time at work. We want to measure something, and it's like
Yeah.
the tapes is this giant curve.
Get the measuring papyrus.
That's right.
It's gonna blow in the wind and rip.
Yeah.
There's no way, dude.
Right.
Do we get the 13-acre measuring papyrus?
Right, yeah.
So we can get the side of this pyramid.
Yeah.
They just made
right.
slaves lay down head to toe.
It's 1,462 slaves long, sir. No, that's not quite right. How do you? Yeah, but slaves come in lumps.
Find a tall one.
That's where that whole thing comes from. Like in elementary school, and they make you line up like tallest to shortest.
Yeah.
It's from ancient times.
That's right.
It's a measuring.
Demarcation of measuring. That's right. Ancient metrology.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're all 14 years old, but we're going to stack them up in like height. You got the Nefas at the back, right? I thought that was so you could, wherever you were in line, you could always see the teacher because the people in front of you were shorter. Like, that's what I thought it was.
That makes way too much sense.
I was always at the back of the line too because I was like older than everybody, so I was always way too tall. So I get to look at everybody's heads all the way down.
Anyway, where were we?
I don't know.
Measuring sticks.
Yeah, well,
Rulers. You're a freaking ruler.
God damn it! Supposed to measure stuff, not control
Tyrannize
people.
us.
Yeah, tyranny. I'm here to rule over you. No, it's supposed to measure things.
I remember the first time you told me that one.
Yeah,
I was like, I've never thought of that. Oh my god.
yeah, I know. That's
Globe.
like that happened to me too.
Why they're carrying that freaking scepter, you know?
Yeah.
It's got the globe on it and
Yeah.
got some ratios and
Fucking surveying instrument. The flail was to cut down the bushes so they could. So,
that was the flags, right?
yeah.
They stick the flags in the ground. It's the flail.
They're holding a shitload of flags. That's the flail.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Fucking surveyors, dude.
He's got his surveying stick and his fucking flags.
I'm telling you.
We'll
man.
put some pictures on the show notes so you guys can see what we're talking about.
Yeah, we've been wrong for so long. It's ridiculous.
That's basically the point of this segment, that we're fucking wrong about everything all the time. Like, and I this is interesting to me in a sort of a philosophical way, right? So,
But,
well, go ahead.
no, sorry.
But, okay, like, why is that the case? Like, why are we always wrong? Like, when we make suppositions, right? We look at is it the current is it the current age's worldview that is causing this? Is it our languages? But why is it that, like, when we look at the world and we don't have empirical data, but we're like, okay, we see things happening, like we're like, well, how is this happening? And we make up a model, but then we go and actually scrutinize it. We're wrong in every possible way. Like, why does that happen all the time?
I don't know, but when I first figured out that we were wrong about everything, I've been proving it every day since.
Might even be wrong about that.
Yeah.
It's fuck.
Tomorrow I'll be like, damn it.
Yeah, didn't prove it that time. Shit, not fucking wrong. Yeah, I think it's interesting, like, because there's this Gnostic idea, and it's more than Gnostics, but like this concept of the universe as a construct that is a teaching machine, right? And the Gnostics didn't really think that. They did think it was a construct, but like this whole thing about esoterica, right? Sometimes it looks to me like that the idea for esoteric information actually comes from the structure of the universe and the way things work. That it just comes from them, because it seems like this information is occulted behind something else that you can easily see, right? So like we look at something and we make up an idea about it, and then when we really scrutinize it and really get down into the details, you find out that your idea is not what's happening, but there's something much more interesting going on. That's esoterica in a nutshell, right? Yeah. That what you see on the surface is interesting enough for you to tell other people about it, but it isn't. But when you really look at what's happening, what you see on the surface or your ideas about what you saw on the surface are completely wrong. But what's really happening is far more fascinating than anything you came up with, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that seems to be built into the structure of the universe. Like, it's almost like it's purposeful. That's why I'm asking. Like, do you think there's some reason why we're?
Well, I have a materialist reason.
Okay.
That we're made up of a bunch of sensors.
Oh, yeah.
And like the sensors, like I'll just use light.
Yeah.
So when we look at the trees and all the plants growing green in the spring, we're like, oh, they're all green. And then when we study it a little closer, we're like, actually, they're not green at all. They're reflecting green.
Yeah, they're rejecting green. Yeah.
That's how we see them, though.
Yeah.
So in a sense, they are green because that's how they're represented to us by the universe. The universe, right? Like in the light that's going through it, or whatever frequencies are bouncing off of these things, show us the things, but they're not the things themselves.
Right.
But they do represent what's inside the thing. So, like the chlorophyll, all the scientists are like, when they teach you in school, it's like, well, the chlorophyll makes a tree green, right?
And that's
like,
true.
well, actually, it's sort of true because
it makes the tree green because it rejects the green color.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So just like in Esoterica, there are key bits of information that rewrite the entire picture. Right. So looking out at the world without knowing anything about light and how it works or whatever, you would see things as that's gold, that's black, that's green, that's blue.
Right.
But then once you have this key piece of information that what you're actually seeing is this stuff being reflected, okay, as opposed to being absorbed by these objects, then suddenly it reverses everything. And you're like, oh, like it's blue because it's not blue, right? It's blue because it rejects blue.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about.
So it's like thinking of it deeper than it's like, well, what is blue? Blue is a frequency. So the thing is rejecting a frequency, which means what? That frequency is not absorbed by the thing.
Right.
So that it does tell you something about the thing. That the thing resonates at other frequencies in the color spectrum, so that it absorbs these other colors and rejects the blue, so that you know that really inside it's resonating at the frequency of like the red and the...
That's what I mean. That's why it's like Esoterica. The information is there, but it's hidden behind this key piece of this. You have to have.
That's what my materials answer is that it's because we're made up of sensors that are picking up everything that everything's rejecting.
Okay.
Right. Or if we had infrared sensors, what we do, our skin, pretty much, is the infrared sensor. Like we can pick up someone's body heat.
Yeah.
And that is actually emanating from them.
Right.
So in a sense, like we are getting a real sense of what.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So some things are direct, right? Like smells, like that can be directly emitted by something. It's not a rejection, right? It's coming from something or whatever.
Right.
It's being made by it. Like when you smell a flower, like those molecules are coming off of it because it's partially made of them.
Right. But alter the sensor and it appears totally different again.
Yeah.
So like when we build a scientific sensor, scientific eye, it picks up shit that we'd never see. Right. So it's like. Depends on...
But building a scientific eye is, in a sense, it's stepping into the path of the initiate. Like, you are endeavoring to have a deeper understanding of the things that you're experiencing. That's what I mean. Like,
but it even goes deeper, right?
Yeah.
The more complex the eyeball you build, the more crazy the information you're getting.
Right.
Like, what the fuck was this?
And does that mean that, like, a more complex eye is not necessarily a more correct one? Like... Because sometimes the very simplest things like make everything clear.
Yeah, so that was another like kind of going back on my own point, just like that the tree, you could say, is everything but green, but then like maybe the green color, the way we experience the green color, really does say something about the tree itself that we can't see, that we don't understand. Right? I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I think that I guess my broader point that I'm getting at is that it's never what it appears to be at first glance.
Right.
And that is built into everything in the universe. And you're saying, and that's because of the way we're built. But we're part of the universe. Like this, in other words, the whole design seems to be, you see what I mean? Like in Esoterica, the design of the stuff is keeping in mind who is going to be experiencing it and how. So you make it so that it's on its first glance to those people who will be experiencing it, they'll see something that isn't really what you're trying to convey.
Right. But it's almost like when you start looking into Esoterica, like the way they design things is very much like it's as though those who designed the esoteric were scholars of the universe.
That's
and
what I
how
mean.
the universe worked. And so they're looking at the way the universe is naturally, and they're trying to reproduce it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I was like at the beginning of this, I was like, does it seem like the whole concept of esoteric traditions actually comes from the way the universe is? Like,
Are you trying to say that I was arguing with you, and now I'm telling you your own point?
Yeah. How did this happen?
This is fascinating to watch.
This is what I started out
I'm
saying,
sorry.
and now you're like, yeah, dude, let me explain this to you real quick.
I wasn't following you initially. So.
Okay. Yeah, that was.
But I wasn't trying to argue. I was trying to.
No, that's great that you came to that, because that's exactly what I was trying to say. That I'm like, doesn't it seem kind of like that the whole idea of esoteric knowledge comes from looking at the universe and realizing that it's built this way?
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's fucking awesome, right? Like,
Hell yeah.
I would add that it seems philosophically that one of the biggest differences between modern society and what we perceive to know about esoterica is that we no longer have a general belief in our scholars of anything that is greater than our own knowledge.
Yeah,
we are
that's
no
right.
longer acceptant of a wise man realizes he knows nothing.
Mm-hmm.
We do not aspire to greater answers than the ones we already have. In that time, there was high spirituality. There was a God, there was a greater force. You accept that the things that you cannot explain may be explainable, but that because of the fact that they are beyond you, you have a whole different perspective on all of it. It's
right.
It's almost,
There's a sort of an awe,
Right.
because you're looking at it in terms of like, this was built by an intelligence, by something that meant to do it, and so like your
let's
entire
build
approach to it is completely different.
Let us build this temple in the image of God.
right. Like you're not trying to quantify it as much as you are to see it, to understand
Right.
the way that it moves from point A to point B.
Right, and in so doing, hopefully, like the idea that I always see is that in studying the universe, you are in a sense attempting to understand the mind of God, right? That, like by looking at something He built, and if He built everything, you're like, okay, so like by doing this, you are like increasing your relationship with this whatever it was that built the universe, right? This is the endeavor, and so the cathedrals, these things that where you walk in, you're just like, oh my God, and just like make you weep.
Yeah.
Those were built as a response to all this information they learned, and they're like, here's what we know about God, right? And
Right.
they build this thing that when you walk in, you're just like, holy fuck. And I think that's awesome. You know?
This actually just kind of dawned
Russ
on me.
walks into a house of God and goes,
Holy fuck!
and is
amazing.
immediately thrown out on his ass.
holy fuck.
But God wouldn't care. Yeah, the people in there would throw me out, but God wouldn't care.
So think of it this way, right? Like if you're looking at flowing water in a river and you see the river and the water flowing, you get the idea to build a mill wheel, right? And so you've got this giant wheel that harnesses the power.
What?
Two different conceptual approaches. If you're looking at the water and trying to...
I'm just thinking about jumping in. Like, you come to a mill wheel, I'm like...
Well, if you're trying to understand it, you're trying to prove that you are equal to God, you then start talking about the hydrogen bonds between the water molecules and all of this crap that is
Yeah.
completely unnecessary
Fluid
to
dynamics.
put a wheel in it,
Yeah.
for the wheel to turn,
just
to take
put a wheel in
advantage
it.
of.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
But if your focus is on being able to recreate a river, you're going to completely lose it.
Or your focus is like, nothing understands this until we do.
Right.
Because it's all dumb chance.
And if anybody tries to do anything with it, well, they're stupid and it's not going to work. Like the mindset itself and the approach destroys, in some ways, like the ability to appreciate it, to do anything with it.
Yeah.
It's like we live in a world where we're all perfectionists, except for the ones who decided to stop because it was dumb.
Well, yeah, there's a phrase that I can't remember it right now, but it basically has to do with the idea of a materialist world, like being bereft of spirit.
Right.
Right. It is a. I think Alex Sakaris, the guy who does Skeptico, says this all the time, that we live meaningless lives in a meaningless universe. Like that's a. If you think about that for long enough, you start to realize how deeply damaging that is, right? Like that. If all this is just by chance, that there's nothing behind it, and it all just then our lives are meaningless, right? And then you go on the internet and look at you can find millions of people seeking for meaning in their lives, and people that commit suicide are like, I don't have that, there's no meaning in my life, I don't mean anything to anybody or whatever. Like, you lose the meaning by saying that the universe is dumb, it has nothing behind it, and therefore we have nothing behind us, right? If the universe is unconscious, this is called the hard question of consciousness. If the universe is basically made up of unconscious matter, then we ourselves are actually unconscious, because you can't get consciousness from something that isn't conscious. You can't take a bunch of tiny things that are not conscious and stack them all together and somehow arrive at consciousness, which is, you can't do that, right? Like, or at least nobody has ever been able to show how that could happen, right? And like one thing that empirical science is supposed to do is to say, like, we won't accept assumptions that have no provenance. That, you know, like if you're going to say that we're conscious because you can take a bunch of tiny things and stack them all together in a certain way and arrive at a conscious being, well, then you need to show how that's possible, and no one's been able to do it. Which basically, but they've been maintained in this materialist worldview, which basically says that we're not actually conscious, and we live in a meaningless universe, and our lives are meaningless, and nothing has any meaning at all.
And yet
that's a devastating concept. It's a terrible, you know.
Yeah, and yet they endeavor to explain the mechanisms, where if it's all random, there is no explanation. Their entire attempt is paradoxical.
Yeah. The explanation is pointless and meaningless.
Right, because it randomly happened,
Right.
so why does it matter?
Yeah. It doesn't matter if there's...
It could have inspired like somebody though. It's like the universe has no meaning.
There may be no
I'm gonna go
inspiration!
find it. Suddenly their life has meaning.
Yeah,
I shall find the
The
meaning.
meaning of life is to find the meaning of life. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, like materialism should be dead. It should have been dead a long time ago. Like, this goes back to like another thing that we talk about on this show a lot, which is like, what is the impetus behind some of these vast cultural things that are going on? What is causing us to hold on to this idea that is so obviously faulty, right? Like, and not only faulty, but just terrible. Like, it's not a fun idea. It's not a good idea. It's kind of an unpleasant concept that everything is meaningless and anything you do, it doesn't matter. You know, like you're not anything greater than the mush that's in your brain or whatever.
But it's like a trap, because once you start teaching that to a society, and then the society begins to just do whatever the fuck because nothing matters.
Nothing matters.
Then it's really hard to turn back.
Right, and to suddenly say, wait, everything matters, and all that shit that I did when I thought nothing matters is gonna pay for that later. Yeah, like I've said that because like there's this idea, there's this pretty common idea. If you go anywhere where a bunch of atheists gather, first of all, they're all pissed off all the time, and it's not fun. But if you can see when they're talking, they think that people who believe in any kind of life after death, spirituality, whatever.
Dumb.
Well, yeah, they think they're dumb, but they also think they're weak-minded, that they're terrified of the idea of permanent death, of what were you calling it? Real death, like actually dying and like having not existing anymore, right? And I always tell them, I'm like, no, I mean, like, yeah, that's an unpleasant idea, but oblivion is not going to be terrifying because I won't be there to experience it. I'll be oblivious, right? Like, I'll die and I'll be gone, therefore. It's not really that scary. It's not pleasant, but it isn't something that's terrifying. However, what is terrifying is somebody who thought that's what it was like and then finds out it isn't, and that they're going to pay for everything they did when they thought that it wasn't like that. That's fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
Right.
Or it's more terrifying thinking that there is meaning and that there is a consequence to your actions.
Right.
Basically what you're saying.
Yes, exactly.
It's more terrifying to think that there are consequences to the things you do than
That
that
you-
you
that-
can
that
do
are gonna-
whatever you want and then you'll die and go into
Right.
oblivion.
That you may have to like experience those consequences for eternity. Right. You know, this idea that they have of like, well, you're going to burn in hell forever. Well, whatever. But if you think that, then yeah, I can see how an atheist would be more terrified of that. Right. This is, what was it called? Pascal's wager. Right. This is Pascal's wager was basically like, it's even if you don't really kind of believe in God, you're better off pretending you
Yeah,
do
I
and
was
kind of
just
like going through the
thinking the same
motions.
thing.
Because if God isn't true and you die and nothing and there's nothing, you're fine. Right. All religious people who die and there's nothing, they're fine. Right. They're gone. But anybody who didn't believe in God and dies to find out there is one, they're fucked, right? So Pascal's wager is like, you probably should go through the motions because that's if you were a gambling person, this is the safe bet. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a poker term called being pot committed, where you have enough money invested that making the call, even though you think you're going to lose,
Yeah.
it is statistically better for you to make the call than to not make it.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't really understand the math behind it. I just know that it's true. But
Yeah.
like it's pretty complicated. But yeah, if you were to fold at this point,
and you
You
did that,
screw up.
and you did that regularly, you would,
Yeah.
yeah. It's better to make the call, exactly, because there's a chance that they're bluffing, right? Yeah. So Pascal's wager is basically like you need to pretend that you believe in God, at least, go through the motions, guy, because if he is real and you didn't believe in him, you're fucked.
Yeah.
But if he's not real, no one cares because they die and there's nothing there.
One thing we definitely know is true.
Snakes exist. That's right. Then we're going to come up with the last segment, and Brett's going to tell us about another weird god called Ahura Mazda. He made little, like, Japanese cars.
Are you really?
well, I mean, I can go into the beginnings of it. I still have,
Don't tell me you drove all the way out here to not talk about Ahura Mazda. 'Cause
I have not. I've yet to figure out what is the first thing that would make Ahura Mazda most happy.
All right, with that, we'll take a break.
yeah, snakes.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, for part 2 of the final segment of the final hour of Snake Bros.
Take
because
2.
I didn't hit record the first time. So we're going to repeat everything exactly as it was said before. We are in the 10 by 10 by 10 danger cube of science, high atop the Edwards Plateau,
Yep.
Texas Hill Country, and we have the official show observer in the cube, Brett England, and he's been doing some research. And I was asking in the first take, so how this came about, like.
Well, first you said that, like, he's going to talk about something that material scientists think is bullshit.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And I said that that's what the show is about. It's about everything that science thinks is bullshit. And then you said, how did this come about? Yeah, I think that's how it went. Something like that.
You're right. You're right.
I just wanted to get that back in there because I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
That's what this show is about. Everything that science thinks is bullshit. So yeah, like, Brett was hanging out at the top in the tower with me one day, and we were talking about ancient shit like we're always doing, talking about pyramids and stuff. And then I was just like, there's this really weird fucking religion. It was a monotheism that just kind of came out of nowhere in the Middle East back in the day, and it was called Zoroastrianism, and it was really strange. And like he was like, what? He looked it up on his phone, and he was just like, for the rest of the day, he's like, holy shit. And he started reading passages to me, and I'm like, holy shit, that is fucking weirder than I thought it was. So I was like, you should, like, he was really into it, so I was like, you should, like, do some segments on it on the show. So that's part of the reason why we had him out here tonight. So
We'll call this Zoroastrianism Part 1.
take 2.
Take 2, part 1.
No, it's great because much like the podcast, the first recording, or what would have been recorded, it's lost forever. And so now we start at number
We only have
2.
like 6% of what was been
That's what you
said.
should say. This is Zoroastrianism, part 2. Part 1 is gone.
That's right. There was no episode 1, and we only have 6% of what's been said about Zoroastrianism tonight.
So, like, actually, when you did that, and I think the first time around, I pointed out that you do this to me all the time. Like, you say something, and I'm like, fuck, I had stuff to do this week. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Damn it. I had shit to do.
But one of the first things that struck me, so I found their only remaining holy text called the Zen Vesta, which the structure, after it's been translated to English, the way that things are said are so weird. Like, there's a conversation between Zarathustra, who the Greeks called Zoroaster,
Yeah.
and Ahura Mazda, the god, and the way that he poses it, Ahura Mazda, what is the thing that would makes thee most happy?
Yeah.
And he says, the thing that makes Ahura Mazda first most happy, and then second most happy, and it's like a list of commandments
Yeah.
almost, but just the structure of that as it sits, because you can take some like liberties when you translate,
Yeah.
but that's just how it translates. It's not like, what things should I do that are going to keep me righteous? Like the 10 Commandments. They're in no particular order. These are ordered. Like, Ahura Mazda wants this shit most.
Yeah, he's got
Then this.
priorities.
Yeah.
He's got his priorities in line. Well, I think there's some correlation to the Bible. Like they say, this is most pleasing to God or whatever.
Yeah, and that's Ahura Mazda's response.
Yeah.
Ahura Mazda finds most pleasing,
Yeah.
bam.
This is what makes me most happy. Okay,
Right.
guy.
And it's really interesting because as I went to read it, so copy that I found that's actually, if anybody wants to look into it, and it is really great stuff, the best source that I found is actually at sacredtext.com.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's my,
And
that's my spot.
they have a preface of
my
just
hangout.
4 of these gigantic pages that are, before you even get to the text, talk about all of the historical freaking melee that has
Yeah.
been had over this. Because in ancient Greece, they viewed Zarathustra as this incredible sage.
Yeah.
Right? He was infinitely wise, and he was like as smart and most awesomely academic Greek as anyone could ever be, even though he was Persian. But
Do you remember the story of him kind of like Ahura Mazda being like, hey, you want to do this? And he's like, no. And he to tell that story is badass. Like how he became the sage.
Yeah, essentially, it's really weird. So he is sent basically word of it's almost like you are to be the prophet of Ahura Mazda, and he's like,
I don't want to.
yeah, he's like that does not interest me or sound like a thing I want to do at all. And it's sent by like a bird, and then another bird comes, and then there's symbolism and imagery there that is lost to us now, but there's animal messengers that are sent, and then finally when he sees one that just strikes him as like, holy crap, I better take this seriously, then he's like, okay, now I'm ready to listen. And Ahura Mazda comes to him, and that's when that's when they start having a conversation about the things that make Ahura Mazda most happy.
Right.
And it's like just that on its own. You look at it, and and I started reading it to try to find parallels or comparisons that could be made to the well-established, well-researched, common known faiths, mostly Judeo-Christian ethic, and others, and they're just not there.
Yeah, they're not there.
Like things like the fact that you do not bury the dead.
Yeah.
You do not, like, you leave them out. They actually have these in Iran still.
Yeah.
Giant, like, think of like a coffee cup that's like sort of shallow,
Coffee cup and
it's like 10 to 15 feet off the ground. It's made of stone, and there's these little like channels in it because that's where you lay the bodies so that the carrion fowl can come down and the dogs can eat them.
yeah, that's practiced by some indigenous people. Like they don't
Yeah.
believe in confining to the earth the dead. They believe in like returning everything to nature. And then then they go gather your bones. They call it laying in state, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, once you're down to the bones, they gather up the skeleton and they'll kind of like put it in a little alcove somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was a huge like fight from I think it's like 1650 till about 1890 or so.
BC?
No, AD with the scholars who were studying it, and the insistence was upon the fact that it was derived from Vedic texts.
Oh, yeah.
So that not only did they come from the same source, but that Zoroastrianism had kind of grown as a
Like a
sort
cult
of fork that had come off of the same
Yeah.
path, but that it was a fork away from the Vedic texts and the precursor to Hinduism.
Yeah, so that would be a huge fight because during those periods, the scholars believed in the Aryan invasion,
Right.
And the prominence of the Vedic texts were not that old and came from
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing that's ultimately been discovered, and the first translation was done by this French guy, and literally everyone turned to him and they were like, "There's no way, nope. Everything you
That
said
book
is
did
wrong.
not say that. Yeah.
We know from the Greeks that Zarathustra was this, and this, and these things, and no, it has to do with the Vedic text." Look, man, and he basically goes, "No, this is what it says." No. And
Yeah.
like the biggest problem they had with it was the fact that it completely showed that in no way, shape, or form, maybe they came from the same root, but they were two individual,
Yeah.
unique points coming off of that node.
I mean, one thing you cannot say about the Vedic texts is that they were monotheistic.
Right. And
The Hindus have like thousands and thousands.
right, and Mazdaism was. It was
Yeah.
like aside from that one brief period in Egypt referenced before where all of a sudden there's only one God.
Yeah, and that seemed to be the same period. Yeah.
Yeah, the Zoroastrianism is a monotheistic belief. There is no other God.
Yeah.
And some of the
That is
things
what makes Ahura Mazda most happy.
Do they
Yeah.
do they talk a lot about like creation, or is it more like the god is just like going around doing stuff?
and that's another interesting thing.
Is he a man-like god, or you know what
So
I'm saying?
it-
Like, does he have
they
a
don't-
physical form?
They don't necessarily, his representation's kind of weird.
Yeah, he's depicted as standing in a flying disc. Like there's a circle.
Oh, yeah.
with the wings,
guy.
and it's got the
Yeah.
two legs coming out, and he's
Yeah.
always standing in it. Yeah, that's Ahura Mazda.
Oh, okay.
Like he's basically an alien in a spaceship. Like
Yeah.
it's clear.
And
So because like my new thing right now is like, and this is one of the reasons
Gods
why
are
I'm
planets.
listening to Enoch is that gods are like sort of personified
Astronomical bodies.
astronomical bodies
Right.
that do stuff.
Yeah.
And they affect the world, and they change shit and whatever. So
So that'd be interesting. Like Ahura Mazda could be their name for Venus.
potentially, I mean, it's really difficult. And one of the big problems is that most
what
of their
makes Venus
texts.
most happy?
So one of the biggest problems is that they have a prior knowledge of, through oral tradition, like the things they used to have.
Time and space.
Like a majority of the practicing Zoroastrians now live in India.
Yeah.
And
Because
Back in India.
if they were
Because they were a branch from the Vedic.
right, and that's another reason why
well, if they
that
were trying to
got
practice
thrown
it,
in.
if they were trying to practice it where they originally were, they would be dead.
Right.
Yeah.
There was an invasion of Islam that came up, and basically it was the death of Persia,
Yeah.
Babylon. That whole
Yeah.
tradition stopped right there. And the way that they did it was actually kind of funny, when you look at it historically, because you didn't have to be there. Like, they didn't force conversion. They didn't
yeah.
force conversion, but it was like, oh, well,
Yeah, it's dimitude.
we know that there's a shortage of all these foodstuffs right now, but if you practiced Islam, we've got this big warehouse over here, and you can have all you want. If you're a Zoroastrian, then you're just gonna have to go off and die.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
like,
I think it's this dimitude, right? They have this idea of like you're 2/3 of a person, or like
Right.
that kind of concept. Yeah.
so what ended up happening was they had one group that stayed and continued to practice. So there is still a small group in Iran, that whole region, Iraq,
Yeah.
there. But there was a group that left, and they basically sought asylum. And a king in one of the provinces of India was like, "Well, I mean, you guys aren't going to start any shit. Then, like, yeah, you can live here."
One more god won't matter to us.
Yeah.
We won't even notice.
And so that's essentially what happened in their travel and in that conquest and the whole process. All of their texts were destroyed.
Yeah.
What remains is like basically a prayer book in a lot of ways, which is why it also reads so strangely.
Yeah, it reads like the Psalms.
But they had oral tradition, or
It's sort of like the priests who had the texts, who had read through them. I mean, imagine it in terms of like there's a minister at a church now. He may be able to quote scripture, but ask him specifically to recite the whole Bible.
Yeah,
and you're not necessarily going to have it there.
I would say that the vast majority of our knowledge about Zoroastrianism did not come from the people that still practice it, but it came from ancient shit we've found since, like tablets that were buried or hidden that did not get destroyed when the you know what I'm saying? Like there's carvings of like that they found of Ahura Mazda leading people, like all that kind of, that's the vast majority of our knowledge has come from like ancient ruins that have yielded up tablets of non-destroyed Zoroastrianism stuff.
And the other interesting thing is that the text that we do have this is part of the way that it was justified that you can't say that this has any connection to the Vedic text. So ancient Persian is a language.
Yeah.
Zend itself is a language. When the Greeks came and basically occupied that region, there was a sort of hybrid or new language created, sort of like a Creole or something, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That was Zend. This text is written in the Zend language, so it puts a direct time on, kind of when this would have been there.
Yeah.
Because it isn't a thing that would have been spoken by them had they been, had
Previous
it
to
been
Greece, yeah.
historically when they said that it was written. And that just throws another monkey wrench into the whole thing. Like, researching this, the one thing that I've found that is unilaterally, like, whole thing is Well, okay, well, if you take this, then maybe you could say that. But if you say that, they have no idea. Like,
Yeah.
it is so scrambled
Yeah.
that it almost becomes incomprehensible. And if you read the translations, the things that you see and you can draw these parallels to, even if you do that, it's difficult to take any line of thought that you can run away from that with. But there are some things that are really, really interesting and kind of become usable. For example, the great mountain that's at the navel of the earth. In Hinduism, I forget what they call it at the moment. But it's basically the center of the earth, this mountain.
Yeah.
It's like the origin.
They circumnavigate it every year.
Right,
Yeah.
it's the equivalent of
It's like a giant pyramid.
Yggdrasil, which is the tree of life. Well, this is the same sort of concept, but it's a mountain that's present in Hinduism. It's present here
Kailash. That's it.
in Mazdaism, and they both speak of it in the same terms, in the same
Yeah.
thought processes. And what it really does show is that the Vedic texts, these religions that have come from them, are creations or birthed by another
Yeah,
thing
some deeper, more ancient
that
thing.
is more ancient, and it is apparently powerful enough.
Yeah.
that,
Kailash is supposed to be the place where Brahma sleeps.
So I guess
Right.
what I was getting at really, and I should ask more directly, do you think this, like after looking into it, that the whole thing was sprung up because like some Nepha flew down there in a spaceship and just like, you know, is that, because, you know, like we were just talking about the Book of Enoch, and
Right.
that's kind of what it seems like,
Yeah.
you know.
It seems like a Neva flew down and started.
They just like
Yeah.
a Nepha shows up and like pulls him into a spaceship and then shows him all this stuff and tells him a bunch of propaganda, and then he goes and starts teaching it.
Yeah, Ahura Mazda seems to have been somewhat more benevolent than that, at least in the sense that like there's all this data that we have now that show like the underground cities.
Right.
Yeah, talk
And
about that.
It seems more to me like Ahura Mazda, if you're trying to give him an archetype, is more in line with maybe like Viracocha, where
Yeah.
he's trying to teach, and like so
He
the
also
things.
tries to preserve.
Yeah, the things that make Ahura Mazda most happy are the things that are best for a person to do if they wish to not
civilized
get
and-
dysentery and die. Right, like
Yeah.
get civilized.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
he's trying to keep them alive. Like he directs them to build those enormous underground cities in Turkey. There's carvings of Ahura Mazda like in the walls and stuff, like showing him like floating above the people that are doing all the work.
Yeah.
So like it looks like he comes down and he like sort of he wants this guy to be his spokesperson, right? But he doesn't fill him full of propaganda. He basically is like, look, we got a lot of work to do if you guys are going to live through this thing that's coming in the next, you know. And so and then they do all this work and shit, and they live underground through these cataclysms because of Ahura Mazda. He's trying to save them, you know.
Yeah, and
At least that was the what I got from some of it. Yeah.
It definitely does follow that kind of line, and it's also interesting because Ahura Mazda has an enemy, right? There's like an anti-Ahura Mazda,
yeah.
and of course, being
He's a Hora Nissan.
Yeah. It's like a Mitsubishi.
you know, and of course, being the show observer, I'm totally prepared with my facts. Stall for a couple of seconds. While I look this up, there's actually a very interesting thing. This is probably the most like mind-altering thing that I found. So, the Magi are derived from Mazdaism. They were the fire temples, the worshippers of fire, the
Yeah.
Magi. The Magi are like, and you hear about their presence through the region for
Yeah.
ever, like back into antiquity and all the way up into, you know, like
And they seem to come from nowhere. Of course, they popped out of the ground.
and they have weird fire magic in
Yeah.
like their fire temples. It's just very strange practice, sort of
Doing
like druids.
fire ritual, dude.
Yeah, but the Magi come from Mazdaism.
Yeah, the three kings.
Mazdas.
But yeah, so while you're still looking that up, okay, yeah. So like these underground cities in Turkey like have been fascinating me for a long time, and apparently they stem from this whatever happened here with Zoroastrianism, and it does appear to be like not an outlier, but it is unique. Like it's was it an isochron, like geologists call it, like this unique event that happens very quickly. You know, it comes out of nowhere, it happens very quickly and changes everything. Like, it's like that. It's like this being or whatever, it comes like, or just maybe if you just want to call it a belief and just get rid of all the ideas of Nephas. Like, this man, Zoroaster, like suddenly begins to say all this shit, and like he's saying that he's being talked to by a god, right? But he correctly leads people into like digging underground and making these enormous cities that they go to live in which they survive this cataclysm. And they say it was a cataclysm of ice, okay? That the surface of the world became uninhabitable by cold, okay, because of the close passage of astronomical bodies of evil gods, right? And that makes sense because when you look at these underground cities in Turkey, they don't make any sense in like people try to say that they were done for defensive, but they have these like amazing ventilation that all these holes ending up on the surface, and if you were trying to hide from an invading army, that would be deadly. They would just be pouring burning oil down all your fucking breathing holes, and you would die.
So sitting on them and farting and stuff.
Yeah. Oh God, we're dying down here. And like the doorways do look defensive because they're all rolling. They're these enormous rolling stones, right? And if you're on the outside of the door, right, on the inside of the door, there's a big handle that you can grab and like make it roll, and it rolls in a track, okay? Mm-hmm. But the portal that it covers is also circular, but it's much smaller than the stone. So like on the outside, all you see is like this circle that has a smooth piece. Yeah. You can't do anything with it because the rock is too big for you to move with your hands from the outside. Yeah, but it also makes a really good seal because the rolling stones are like a foot thick. They make an excellent insulating seal against like deep cold, right?
So it's just another arc, right?
Yeah, it is an arc. Like if you think about it, all the ventilation, and the ventilation is insane. Like it has to be technological because there are tiny little tubes and pipes that go up multiple levels through all. Like how do they do that? Like this little 1-inch tube that connects this room
straight through the rock,
right? Bored straight all the way up to the surface. Going between the hallways and shit of other rooms above and everything like that. They held a whole marketplaces down there, like pre-built, and then they've recently found out that all of the cities that are underground in that area have a deep connect. They have subways below, like I call them subways, but like if you go all the way to the bottom, there are these enormous hubs of gigantic roads that go off to the other cities miles and miles away through the rock.
Oh my God! That's
right?
Freaking
They're
awesome.
all connected now. It's possible that they did all the digging and got into them, and then did the work to connect them while they were living.
What are they
going
to do with all the dirt?
That's true. Like I was like, where did they put it? They found a gigantic chasm somewhere and they dumped it all in there. I don't know, but yeah, they're connected by miles and miles and miles of roads, and so far they say they haven't been explored, but they go down there and they see just goes off that way. This one goes off to the northeast where they know there's another city over there, and every one that they find is bigger than the one that they found before. Like when they found Darren QU, they were like, oh my God, it's 12 levels deep and can hold 40,000 people. Then they found another one that I can't remember the names of them all, but the most recent one they found, they said it could hold. They didn't even give it an exact number. They said it could hold hundreds of thousands of people for thousands of years, and that it had enormous roads at the bottom. That there were like 12 of them that went off in every direction. And I'm just like, holy shit! And then of course the surface of that whole area is covered in those crazy cart ruts. That whole area is just like, what the fuck was going on here? So.
And all of these are like have carvings of Ahura Mazda in the side.
Yeah, there are places there. Yeah. He's that gigantic dude. Like it's weird because the winged disc we see in all these cultures. Egypt had it, but in Ahura Mazda you see the same
like sticking up from
the top. This guy is like standing in it, like it comes up to his waist or whatever. He's just like, he's pointing that way.
It's interesting because with the absence of original texts or like even records to try to decipher, seeing him all over these places, you would think that maybe someone would go, hey, we should maybe look into these more and see if we can find anything from us. No, cover it with dirt.
Yeah. Well, like
stop digging right now.
All of these cities have been being found very recently.
Right.
But so the people that live in the areas, they do this thing with water. They build cisterns into the limestone.
Right.
So beneath the house, they all dig these like cistern-shaped things, and they'll slowly fill up with water. Right. Or they fill it with water, whatever. That's where they hold it. And like people are going down. The story is always like they were going down to expand their basement or to expand their cistern, and they break into a part of this enormous underground city that nobody knew was there.
Oh my God, that's so freaking awesome.
Dude, I wouldn't tell anyone. I'd be like, my house is huge.
Are there like artifacts and all that kind of stuff in there, or are they just completely empty? Or what's
it doesn't ever say. I always wonder that too, but I assume there must be artifacts because the most recent one that I read about, which is like the biggest one they've found so far, the guy was very old. and he finally told it to authorities, but he had known about it for over 30 years, and he explored it by himself. So you know that there was shit in there, you know. Like he was.
Dude, that's
think about that. Like you just
awesome.
like you have an entrance in your basement to this enormous, massive, ancient underground city that nobody fucking knows about. Holy
Oh
shit!
my God.
People, all his neighbors was like he had to come out of his house in like a week. Like, well, somebody should check on that and do a wellness check on him. And he's like, he's not in there. He must be gone. No, he's down in that underground city, getting lost and dying.
So that would be so freaking awesome. I would never leave my house. My property.
I don't have to leave my house. I've got a city beneath it.
Yeah.
And this is actually another thing that I found really interesting. The name of the evil spirit is Angramanyu, and he is the evil twin of Ahura Mazda.
It's Angry Man.
Yeah.
Right. Angramanyu.
Manu.
But he is the
Man.
polar opposite evil twin, almost like a yin yang, or dare I say, a
Gemini?
Lil.
Yeah.
But he basically, his instructions, the things that make him most happy, the things that he's saying, the whole principle of the entire faith is do good, don't do bad. Like it's and there's no
Excellent to each other.
yeah, essentially.
Party on,
And it's really interesting because it's based around things like, you know, if you have this community where people help each other and you like don't go around stealing from each other, and you know, like the same way that they talk about the civilizer concept. And that's really all it is. And then there's also this list of things, and it's like, and if you choose to do this, you will fall into the ways of Angramanyu, and bad things will happen, and so on and so forth.
Guys, stop eating each other. Please, just, you don't have to eat each other.
Right.
You could wear butt flaps and not eat each other.
And it's strange because it's also considered, although I haven't been able to determine why they consider it this, the oldest religion in the world.
Yeah.
Which others will argue is Hinduism.
I would
because of
say it's the
Vedic
oldest
texts.
monotheistic religion in the
Right.
world.
And to me, what it really says, and this is the greatest, like, question mark at the end of it. Well, I guess the whole thing's kind of question mark after
gigantic.
question mark, but
Ahura
this is
Mazda?
the big overall question mark. What was before this? Because this came from something. Like, this is not
Yeah,
the
what was the
origin
provenance?
of man's, you know, theological development. But this and
Well-
the Vedic texts both come from some event, some history, some something. And whatever that is, like, that's what we should be looking for in my opinion. Take these things and trace them back to find
Well,
that.
their own story does say that, like, Ahura Mazda, the god, shows up and kind of starts this whole deal. Like, so maybe it doesn't have provenance, except that it might have like reflections of older beliefs, but you have this inclusion of a new. Because that's the idea. Is like Zoroaster was in an existing religious, spiritual, Persian
Right.
environment, right? And then this other being that is not in their pantheon at all, like shows up and says, "Look, like I'm a god, and like we got some shit to do," and like he kind of starts a new thing, right? But so there may be reflections of that, but their own story says that this is a brand new deal that happened just because this guy showed up and says we've got to do this.
And there's some parallels there almost to like the New Covenant. Like
Yeah.
the showing up of a new prophet who then says, yeah, the way you guys, we're not going to do that anymore. It's not working out. It's really, really time consuming, and you guys are all unhappy. Like, let's.
Yeah. There's a really interesting, I always thought this was interesting. There's a really strange story that comes from late Sumer about a returning god who comes back. Okay, so like after all the Anunnaki have left, they've either gone into hiding, right? They no longer have public persona. They've gone into, or they've completely departed Earth. There's this very strange story of this old woman who used to be a young priestess in the temple of the god for her city, the Anunnaki guy for her city or whatever, and she was like young at the time. Now she's an old woman. She's a grandmother, right? And she's got this grandchild, a grandson or whatever, and he's kind of like, as he grows older, she keeps returning to the temple, which is all in ruins. She keeps returning to the temple and doing all the rituals that she did as a priestess, begging for the god to come back and saying that, like, if you come back, my grandson can be your, whatever they called him, the priest, the guy that was between the guy. He's like, we will follow all your rituals. We will, please come back and help us, because everything was falling apart. And the Anunnaki does. He sees her and he comes back and, like, by himself comes back, leading all of his people wherever they went. Comes back and for the lifetime of her grandson remains in the city, and it prospers again. That sounds like it could be the
Yeah,
same.
that actually sounds. There's a lot of similarity.
Yeah, and the Sumerians
grandson could have been.
Huh?
Her grandson could have been the guy who.
Zoroaster, right?
Zoroaster, yeah.
The name of Ahura, if this is the same guy, the Sumerians called him Sin. Think about
Right.
that. Yeah, the god of the moon.
That's
the
the other
fucking
thing.
winged disc. It's just like, okay.
Yeah, that's the other thing in the Book of Enoch when he talks about sin. I've been like everything that is associated with sin. Like if you apply that dude to it,
Yeah.
or like to be in sin is his city.
Yeah.
It
changes
like,
it all.
Totally, yeah,
Yeah.
it changes
It
all
does.
of it. Like
Right, and since Sin is a moon god, the idea of the nighttime and the nighttime rituals and all this stuff,
Yeah.
like it just makes sense. Like that,
you will be in darkness.
right? Yeah,
And the actual.
Maybe it
it's-
was
it's Quantsoft.
moonship.
yeah.
Spaceship moon.
A fucking spaceship moonship.
And so another thing that's interesting is if
Sin
you
City, bro.
translate Ahura Mazda, it's like mighty or great or highest wisdom.
Small car. Oh, sorry.
Like it's not necessarily like most of the other faiths when you have like God is referred to as like almighty, super powerful, like
Yeah, creator of
this is
everything.
just-
Blah, blah.
Ahura Mazda is great and mighty wisdom,
That's cool.
which is to me it's like he's not. Why is he here? Because he just needs us to know this shit.
Yeah, he's coming. It's clearly he's coming to assist,
Right.
and like that's why I connected it with that story of Sin and the old woman.
But okay, so you said the Magi, right?
The Magi.
Wisdom,
Yeah,
wizards.
Yeah.
wizards, magi,
Wizardry.
fire wizards.
No, there's a lot to be said there. And one of the other things that's really interesting is no matter how far, like how deep you dig into this rabbit hole, theologians who've like made their entire career, like all of their contribution to like their field has dealt with Mazdaism and Ahura Mazda and Zarathustra / Zoroaster, and literally have moved like the knowledge forward. Just, it hasn't gone anywhere.
Right. They can't go anywhere.
Because there's no new discovery. Like there's no
Except for these massive
These giant cities, yeah.
right.
There's no new discovery that will be accepted into the canon of
Right.
accepted knowledge. Like there are still hundreds of thousands of untranslated Babylonian, Assyrian, Akkadian, and Sumerian texts that just like at some point the funding for that shit dried up because it was turning over too many. It was offending too many people. The shit that was coming out of it was just not. They just don't want it. It just was like it was. It was just
Especially
not
when they translated the one that was like a receipt for brain surgery. They were like,
Yeah.
okay, stop.
Yeah, like the story of the Indian chief who like finally gets defeated, and his whole family never been defeated, and he hands over the talisman that his family had kept. It's a Sumerian tablet. It's a receipt for a sale of a goat or something like that.
Yeah.
And like, why is this here? No. Yeah, so I think is that it? We're out of time here.
Yeah.
They're called the Parsi, by the way, the displaced Zoroastrians who are in India now, and they have all kinds of other problems they create because they have a completely
They're
different.
quant-stuffing it now.
Yeah, they have a completely different historical
And they get
line that
offended.
they draw back, and then they also
Yeah.
say like we're the only true Mazdans because the ones who stayed were intimidated, and it doesn't work out.
Oh man. Well, I think that's about it for this episode, folks. Which episode is it? 47? 47? Is that a prime?
Yeah. I think
As a
so.
show observer usually keeps track of that with email and stuff. I don't know what that guy's deal is.
Yeah. It sounds like it got into a wreck on the way here.
Yeah. The show
Saw
abandoned.
one.
Yeah, so you guys can get a hold of us at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com, or you can go to the blog, brothersoftheserpent.blogspot.com. You can comment there. We've got some great comments going on there. We appreciate that, guys, very much. Keep commenting. I will try to pay attention and reply. Very interested in whatever you guys have to say about the show. You can also go give us like 5-star reviews everywhere, all over the place. And like go to Google and just like post pictures of 5-star reviews or whatever, because you can't actually do them there. Take a screenshot of your 5-star review on iTunes and post it to Google. That would be great.
Go ahead and save that screenshot. You're going to put it lots of places.
That's right. Just put it everywhere. Yeah, that's right. So thank you guys very much. And like, here's one final question to think about: Why our wizards always depicted wearing pointy hats and robes with stars on them because they were astronomers for the longheads.
Dun, dun.
Dun, dun. Magic.
Snakes.
Snakes.
Magi.
Enough is enough! I have had it with these motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking
podcast.